Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Deku Had the Infinity Gauntlet Part 7. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Todoroki sat silently in the limousine's rear. Midoriya sat next to him, trying to distract himself by staring out the window at the people and buildings they were passing. What a ridiculous predicament they were in. Which none of them meant to say. After a long period of silence, Midoriya asked, "Are you still not very talkative?" Todoroki gave him a sidelong glance and asked, "Is that a bad thing?" With a pleasant smile, Midoriya said, "Not at all. It means you're more a person of action rather than words. I like that." Shoto said, "You know you didn't have to give me a ride." "Yeah, but where I'm going happens to be close by to the hospital your mom is staying at," Izuku explained. He asked, "How are things by the way? With your family, that is?" And received nothing but silence in response. "I understand if you don't want to talk about it." "No, it's acceptable to be inquisitive." The dual quirk wielder inhaled deeply before proceeding. "After I was legally emancipated from my father's custody, Natsuo moved out. My sister Fuyumi is the only one who stayed behind, and she won't leave no matter what we tell her." Izuku found it genuinely sad and tragic that, after all this time, she's still trying to hold together a family that's long since shattered. Though he sincerely thanked Fuyumi for her efforts, some things were simply irreparable. "I don't know what to tell you. I've never really had a father in my life. My mother took care of me, so I'm not the best person to go to for family advice." Shoto was now the one asking, "What happened to your father?" His speech was hurried and indifferent, and he said, "I don't really remember much of him. He had to work overseas and left when I was about 5 years old." However, Todoroki made the decision to ignore it. As Izuku stated, it was not his place to investigate, but discussing it was beneficial. The limousine pulled up to the main hospital entrance and the driver said, "I think this is your stop." Shoto was given access there by one of the Titans. The boy peered at the machine that was a member of the squad that guarded the building. A group of Titan robots to guard each member's family and loved ones was one of the perks of being a member of Izuku Midoriya's Knights of Balance. As the door shut behind Todoroki, Izuku only said, "Call when you're ready to leave." Shoto went inside the hospital to see his mother, silently waving at the car. He took the elevator to her room after checking in at the front desk. He gently tapped on the door and stepped inside to find his mother grinning. She said, "Hello, Mom," as she sat in a chair by the window. She made a comment about the boy's absence, saying, "Hello Shoto, it's been a while." But Ray understood, really understood. It was probably difficult to find time with all the training and school. Shoto moved closer and said, regretfully, "I'm sorry." She pulled him into a gentle hug. When he first visited, it was awkward, but he was gradually growing accustomed to it and gave the embrace back. It was his first day off in a long time. "It's all right, you have a lot going on." Shoto chose to tell her everything after she inquired, "So how have you been? Last time you said something about making an important decision." He explained to her why he had joined Midoriya and the Hero Regulation Department, as well as how he had left the University of the Arts. Shoto also talked to her about the other former students that he had recruited. Some of what he said surprised her, but she already knew who Midoriya was and what he had done from watching the news. Although she wasn't exactly in favor of it, it was acceptable if Shoto trusted him. The dual quirk user wanted to know, and who better to tell him than his own mother? "Mom, I need to know. Do you think I made the right choice?" he asked. Ray asked him the same thing. "Do you think you made the right choice?" Shoto said without hesitating, "Yes." With a smile, she said, "Then there you go. You chose to join Midoriya because you believe in his cause." The boy reiterated, "You're right. I want to serve as an example of what a hero should be." His expression darkened at the thought of that man. There are more heroes out there like Endeavor. "I want to help Midoriya change things for the better so people like him will no longer exist." Ray said, her expression melancholy, "Shoto, you shouldn't hate your father." Shoto was shocked to hear, "After everything he did to you, to us, and to Tuya, you still don't hate him." After a few years of therapy, she had long since moved past her fear and rage towards that man, saying, "I don't hate your father, I pity him." Because of who he is and what he's done, he'll never know love, or friendship, or human kindness, and I honestly feel sorry for him." Ray sighed. And now he's lost his quirk, his hero career, and his reputation, all the things that mattered most to him. In a way, he's paid for what he owed. Shoto said, "I still won't forgive him." Ray grinned at her youngest child once more, saying, "That's fine as long as you move on with your life and don't let the past ruin your future." He pondered, "When did you become so wise?" With a playful response, "When I became a mom." Choosing to shift the topic, Ray questioned him further about Midoriya and the group her son had joined. Shoto made a comment regarding one of the group members. He was unable to comment much because it was confidential, but her son did reveal one specific detail about the man's oddity. It brought back a happier memory of those times for the woman. "Look, Mom." A small blue wisp of flame in his hand, held by a red-headed 11-year-old boy, beaming at her, "If I make my flame super hot it turns blue." She shook the recollection to get away from the possibility of where it would lead. It's better not to lose it in front of Shoto. Ray wished her son would never have to witness her in such a way. Meantime, Children's Health and Care Facility. For today's art project, Dr. Higurashi gave Bakugo a crate of colored pencils and said, "Here, why don't you pass these out to everyone?" Although he was quietly complaining, the boy attempted to maintain his composure while giving pencil packs to each child. The intimidating blonde teenager handed the drawing utensils to a group of shy, oddball kids. Bakugo swiftly returned to the front of the art room to stand next to the doctor after he was done. For the past 3 weeks, he had been coming here 3 days out of the week. Aizawa had noticed that not much had changed. Katsuki helped the good doctor, but she didn't interact well with the children. Helping quirky kids was supposed to humble the boy a little and give him some perspective on other people's suffering. That was the homeroom teacher's hope. However, it didn't seem like it would happen anytime soon. Aizawa and Nezu would have to take extreme measures if Katsuki Bakugo didn't start changing his demeanor and behavior. The blonde boy appeared to be reluctant when Dr. Higurashi asked, "Could you keep an eye on them for a few minutes?" "Thanks." She left the room to speak with Aizawa in front of the one-way mirror. Shota looked at her apologetically and said, "Still keeping them at arm's length, is he?" He believed that he was equally responsible for the boy's actions as those who had initially molded him into the person he was today. She sighed sadly. The kids are still intimidated by him. One of the health center employees entered the observation room and whispered something in the doctor's ear, saying, "His perpetual scowl certainly isn't helping things either. Excuse me, I need to step out for a moment." Aizawa watched her bolt, thinking nothing more of it as he kept a close eye on Bakugo. "That's odd," he said to himself. Lobby greeting the visitor at the front door, Higurashi said, "It's always a pleasure when you visit." Walking up to the doctor, Izuku Midoriya said, "Please, the pleasure is all mine. People like you who treat people like me with basic human decency are a rarity and deserve my infinite respect." She said, "Should we meet in my office?" and motioned for him to come along. Izuku trailed behind her, ignoring the looks from the staff and medical personnel, saying, "After you." Even though he had been to the health center multiple times previously, they were still unaccustomed to seeing someone with his level of influence and power enter the building. When they reached her office, the Gauntlet wielder inquired, "So how are things going with all the extra funding you're getting?" "With all the money you donated, we were able to take in more quirkless children, safely removing them from that vile foster care system that treated them like garbage," the doctor explained. "Have any heroes showed up to donate their time?" Izuku had made it known in public that heroes ought to do little acts of kindness for society rather than focusing only on thwarting crime. He didn't like heroes who were just interested in elevating their status by saving the day in the face of villains or natural disasters, then leaving the scene once the job was finished, or worse, staying behind to take pictures and brag to the media. A few of the more sincere pros had made the decision to be open and truthful, asking the Hero Regulation Department for advice. To see what they would do with the information, Midoriya told them about this child care center that took in quirkless children. Dr. Higurashi handed him a clipboard with a list of professional heroes who had visited the facility and given their time to bettering the lives of these children, saying, "I have a list of the ones that have." Izuku read the list and said, Not as many as I'd hoped." He was taken aback to see a top-ranked hero on the list and asked, "Best Genist has been here?" "Oh yes, he's been coming here for quite some time actually, before your department was formed." She explained. Best Jeanist has been visiting while he recovers from a severe injury he got during the Camino incident. He's usually here on arts and crafts days and teaches the kids things like how to macrame copyright. Izuku praised the hero, saying, "What a good man. For his generosity. He was a real hero because he attempted to stop All for One despite the odds being against him." However, the media was more interested in All Might's triumph over the antagonist than in any other story. The woman nervously bit her lip and said, "There's been another development here that you need to know about." "And what's that?" "Time in the workroom." Bakugo strode the room silently, staying well away from the children. He didn't personally have anything against them because he didn't like quirky people in general, only Deku. At least he was forced to admit that during his counseling sessions, he was primarily keeping his distance from these less fortunate kids because he didn't trust himself around them. What if he unintentionally caused them pain or fear by setting off his quirk? Or even worse, what if something awful came out of his stupid big mouth? Where had that mindset been years before? That voice in his mind asked, sounding like Deku. He observed the children drawing silently with crayons and colored pencils as he scanned the room. Among them, one caught his attention in particular. A young blonde child crudely drew a picture of a messy green-haired person wearing gray and having a yellow arm. Bakugo asked, despite the fact that it was obvious who the child was drawing. The boy looked up from his paper and asked, "Who is that?" The child said, "The doctor said we should draw our heroes. I drew Izuku Midoriya." Katsuki paled as the child grinned. "He's your hero?" the older boy asked, gritting his teeth. The child said excitedly, "Yeah. He's quirkless like us, but he didn't let that beat him. He even fought All Might to a standstill." Bakugo said, clenching his fists and trying not to lose his cool, "But he's a villain." The boy with the blonde hair declared emphatically, "He's not a villain." Bakugo wanted to scream. "He's proving quirkless people like us aren't so useless." He intended to refute the child's assertion, claiming that Midoriya was a vile man who ought to rot in jail for his crimes. Regretfully, he was unable. Aizawa made it abundantly evident that one mistake would mean the end of his time in the UA Hero course. Unfortunately, Katsuki's only option was to wallow in his rage. With a joyful exclamation, Dr. Higurashi entered the room again and said, "Your attention everyone." The children's mood brightened and cheerfully as the door opened, revealing Izuku Midoriya. "Your favorite visitor has arrived." He waved and said, "Hello," totally obliging a stunned and motionless Bakugo. The children bolted from their chairs to run to him. They were all talking very animatedly now, full of excitement, a far cry from their usual serious demeanor. Izuku grinned upon seeing the adorable kids once more. Though he was unable to see them as frequently as he would have liked, he always delighted in adding a little joy to their worlds. After all, he was in their position not too long ago. "What's this all about?" Aizawa rushed into the space. Having been observing through the mirror, he became alarmed upon realizing who it was. Fearing the worst, he hurried inside, prepared to protect the kids and his blonde pupil. Dr. Higurashi touched Aizawa's shoulder and said, "It's fine, Aizawa." In an attempt to calm him, she responded, "Director Midoriya comes by every now and then to visit the children. He's one of our financial supporters." Erasure Head gave her a fierce look and stopped moving his capture weapon around him, asking, "Why didn't you inform me of this?" "Honestly," she said, "I didn't think it was important." After giving it some thought, Aizawa saw that he couldn't hold her responsible for that. She was unaware of the tumultuous past between Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya. Bakugo was observing Deku engage with the children as though it were entirely normal. It all became clear why these innocent children looked up to someone with his unique style. With perspiration trickling down the back of his neck, the blonde started to slowly back away. At last, Izuku looked directly at his former bully, his emerald eyes piercing him like angry spears. This was exactly like the nightmares he had been having lately, only it was real. Every horrible thing that he had ever said or done to Izuku was vividly visible to Katsuki in his mind. His darkened eyes reflected everything, promising an endless source of suffering. Izuku instantly returned to his happy self, breaking eye contact and turning back to the children. Bakugo gave up and left the room silently, unable to handle it. Cursing herself, Aizawa pursued him. Izuku watched them go, smirking a little. Katsuki barged into one of the care center's bathrooms and headed straight for the sink. Breathing deeply multiple times, he let some water splash into his face. Looking in the mirror, the fiery blonde forced himself to calm down. Simply unwind, this is meaningless. His mind ceased to race. Whatevs, what if Deku is here? Bakugo tried to recollect the drill's hound dog had taught him for such circumstances. I don't fear him. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not. When he was ready, he turned to leave through the door, but stopped upon hearing two well-known voices in the hallway outside the bathroom. Izuku mockingly said, "So this is what that rodent you call a principal cooked up? Let me guess. This is supposed to teach him humility and respect for others who were not born as fortunate as him. Is that right?" Aizawa retorted, "What business is it of yours how we teach our students?" The Gauntlet user shot a questioning glance at the UA teacher and said, "Come now, you can't honestly believe that this will change who he is. This is obviously just a bunch of nonsense so you can keep Bakugo for his power. If you had any sense you would have expelled him by now." Erasure Head glared at him, quite abandoning his usually worn-out manner. "I know you think that we only care about students based off their quirks and mastery of them, but that's a false accusation. He could not afford to be vulnerable with this boy, not even for a moment." Izuku laughed at the hypocrisy and said, "Nezu said that too. You gave a quirk assessment test on the first day of classes where you threatened to expel the student with the least potential. You were just looking at their quirks, weren't you?" the teen accused. This information came directly from Ochako's own lips. Aizawa countered, "That was a rouse to get them to try their best." Izuku scoffed and said, "Oh please. You expelled an entire class once because their quirks weren't good enough to be heroes. Don't deny it." The teacher persisted in trying to refute Midoriya's views about the way the system was run, saying that quirks have nothing to do with it. That didn't mean UA was the same as other hero schools that were just interested in eccentricities. Yet here you are doing everything you can to give Katsuki Bakugo a second chance when you and I both know he doesn't deserve it. Izuku smirked back at him. If he didn't have such a powerful quirk and a talent for using it, you would have dropped him without hesitation, just like you discarded Uraraka. What about you? Are you saying you weren't interested in Todoroki, Uraraka and Iida for their quirks? Aizawa questioned him. Izuku scowled and stated, "I chose them because they like me wanted to see a change in our hero society. Todoroki was subjected to an abusive father who got away with it simply because he was the country's #2 hero. Uraraka was kicked out of your school for simply trying to do the right thing and help a friend. Iida's brother was forgotten and tossed aside like garbage by the government that runs the hero system. He walked down the hall getting closer to the underground hero. And All Might, the man who you all look up to as the symbol of peace, would see a return to that world and undo all the hard work I've done to create a better society. Thus, All Might remains a danger to him, even with his power waning." Shota Aizawa managed to extract that from the previous statement. Izuku just laughed and said, "You may think you have everything figured out, but you don't. If only Aizawa was aware of his plans." He waved and grinned, saying, "Well, it was nice seeing you here, but as you know I'm a busy person." As he left, Midoriya muttered under his breath, "Best of luck with Bakugo. Not like it will do any good though." Upon rounding the bend and disappearing from view, Aizawa's shoulders began to relax. He breathed a sigh of relief and turned to look at the bathroom door. The door opened, and Katsuki emerged, making a feeble attempt to maintain his tough exterior, but the Eraser hero could sense that he was afraid. "You can come out now, he's gone." He didn't mention how Bakugo almost had a panic attack in the restroom, saying instead, "I think we're done for today. I'll go tell the doctor that we'll be leaving a little early." The boy would have to come to them when he was ready and be honest about his fears and insecurities. They both froze when Midoriya reappeared around the corner, saying, "Oh, and one more thing." Izuku glared angrily at his former school bully, saying, "If he hurts those kids physically, mentally, or emotionally, I will rip his quirk out of him without hesitation regardless of what the law says I can and cannot do." Then he vanished away again. Damn it. Aizawa cursed in his head as he observed Midoriya terrorize Bakugo once more. Erasure Head could tell that despite his best efforts to defend his actions, he was having fun. The same as any villain who was endowed with unlimited power. Afterwards, Island HQ watching his leader walk down the hallway, Shoto said, "You're certainly in a better mood." Leading him through the base to the testing room, Izuku said, "I'm happy, well happy for you actually." Now that Ochako had spent her entire day practicing her wings, Todoroki was in her turn. "Mei finished upgrading the prototype I gave her to work with for your new support gear." The half-boy said, "You really should let that girl sleep. As a matter of fact, she's under my strict orders to sleep at least 8 hours every night and required to take regular meal breaks." Izuku laughed. As soon as they walked into the testing room, Todoroki noticed the two long metallic rectangular cases in the center. "I can tell you how many times I've had to send the robots into her lab to drag her to bed or to lunch. She just doesn't like to stop working." He approached the cases and said, "I take it this is the support gear you promised me weeks ago." He opened the containers, and Izuku said, "Actually, this has been an idea that's been floating around in my head ever since I saw your performance during the sports festival." Leaning over, Shoto released the latches and opened the first case. A long metal claymore sword sat there, encased in a protective foam mold. With its circuit board-like patterns, what appeared to be tiny vents running the length of the blade, and a pale blue coating on the metal, this weapon had a more contemporary appearance. Additionally, the handle had an embedded silver symbol in the shape of a snowflake. When he opened the other case, he discovered a reddish-tinted sword with the same symbol of a flame engraved in the handle. "Two swords?" Shoto questioned, arching an eyebrow. Izuku exclaimed, "Yup," with excitement. Todoroki was first skeptical but followed instructions nonetheless, saying, "Go ahead, pick one up, and channel your quirk through it." Grasping the blue sword in his right hand, he directed his peculiar ice energy into the grips. The blade was immediately covered in an icy mist that emerged from the vents, and the claymore instantly came to life, glowing a faint blue. With pride, the green-haired teen said, "Elemental blades. One of my finest technological works. Though I originally wanted to make it one single sword for you to channel both sides of your, but the constant change in extreme temperatures caused the device to rapidly deteriorate. The science just isn't there yet." Shoto muttered to himself, said the guy with an all-powerful gauntlet. Observing the bewilderment on his face, he instructed him to swing the weapon while using his quirk. "These swords will grant even more strength behind your quirk while increasing your range as well. They'll also help regulate your body temp to limit the negative effects of your quirk." That's what the youngest Todoroki tried to do. He raised the unexpectedly light sword and swung it in a straight line in the direction of the wall. An arc of ice shot from the blade in almost the same instant, smashing into the wall and freezing it in the same direction as his swing. His heterochromatic eyes went wide with surprise at what he accomplished so skillfully with this device and his quirk. "See?" Looking at the sword, Shoto complimented, saying, "Amazing. I see why the media calls you a technological genius." While using technology to enhance quirks wasn't a novel idea, people and governments were always too scared to push it too far. The funny thing is that I'm not really inventing anything new. This stuff has always been around, I just put the pieces together and took it all to a new level. Simply put, they didn't want technology to end up in the wrong hands, which was almost always the case. The user with dual quirks realized, so the red one must be for my fire. "Yes, but I would hold off on swinging that one around until you have better control over that side of your quirk," Izuku warned him. Shoto turned to face his leader and said, "There's just one problem. I don't know how to use a sword, let alone wield two at once." The green-haired teen, looking as menacing as ever, pointed his thumb towards the door where Stain entered just as he said, "That's where he comes in. Stain here is going to give you a crash course on blade wielding. After that you'll have to practice on your own time as I'll be sending him on a secret mission soon." Stain walked over to him with a sneer, saying, "I still don't understand what you see in this kid. How do you know he won't turn into a little Endeavor Jr. on us?" "Because, in contrast to his father, he can recognize his shortcomings and work on improving both mentally and physically," Izuku said, glaring at him and urging him to please get along with Todoroki. Shoto had been honest with the hero killer, telling him directly, "I don't want to work with this psychopath." Izuku turned to face the boy and said, "And I don't want to work Himiko Toga, but she does get good results so I put up with her. Shoto. During missions and assignments you're going to be the leader. When we eventually recruit more potential heroes you'll probably have to work with people you don't like, so you should probably start getting used to it." Shoto was taken aback by what Izuku had just revealed, saying, "Wait, you want me to be the leader?" He had always assumed that the person wearing the gauntlet would be in command. Izuku shrugged, saying, I can't be there every step of the way. I'm not a hero. So someone else will have to take charge as the mighty blade of the Knights of Balance. I think that someone should be you. Izuku interrupted him by raising a hand, I'm not sure if. Izuku began to leave the testing room, saying, it's okay, you don't have to give me an answer right now. He wanted to let Shoto and Stain finish their work. He stopped and turned to face him, saying, after all. Before turning to go, it's your choice. Gran Torino summarized what his former pupil had just said, saying, so you plan to finally arrest Midoriya once and for all. Toshinori said gravely, yeah. Not sure if that was a joke or not, All Might asked. Do you have the stomach for it though? You failed to stop him twice already because of your own feelings of guilt. What will make this time any different? I'll be the one taking him by surprise this time, the man declared firmly. He was alluding to all the occasions they believed they were one step ahead of Midoriya only to discover he was the one ahead of them when he said, are you sure, because from what I've seen you've been down this road before. How do you know this isn't another trap? I'm not so foolish as to fall for that again. Even if it is a trap, we've developed a backup plan. Toshinori told him. We have reason to believe the hero killer known as Stain is secretly working for Midoriya. The masked operative in the HRD seems to possess the same quirk as that man. If we can find some tangible evidence and publicly reveal it. The elderly hero realized, you can use Midoriya's own tactics against him. Gran Torino stroked his wrinkly chin thoughtfully. This time public scrutiny will be aimed at him. I see, you're mounting an attack on two fronts at the same time. As smart as Midoriya is, he can't be in multiple places at once. That's right. When I publicly confront him next week, Nezu is going to take a crack at accessing Midoriya's files. Toshinori explained the plan. He'll be too busy with me to realize that his computer system has been broken into. Not that Gran Torino was doubting the mouse's intelligence or ability to navigate the internet, but accessing a government official's files will be no easy task. How will he do that? All he had to say on the subject was, he has connections with the government. Being UA's principal for so long has granted him certain privileges. The man's former sensei inquired, why did you come here then if you've got everything figured? The gaunt man sighed almost tragically, because when I beat Midoriya this be the final act of my hero career. I can feel one for all bleeding away little by little each day. My final fight with Midoriya will probably expend all of it. The elderly hero considered this and said, one for all, it's part of that gauntlet, the green stone. I'm sure some of the country's top scientists could figure out a way to get the quirk back. All Might declared with pride, whether they can or they can't doesn't matter anymore. I'm entrusting Mirio to Gato with the future. As my successor, if one for all can be retrieved, then by rights it will go to him. Gran Torino watched his former student stand up, stutter for a short while, and then straighten himself. Well then, good luck to you. Then the man with the blonde hair left his home. Call it hunches or old sense, but something didn't feel correct. It was almost as if there was a persistent feeling of uncertainty that Toshinori might lose. Then why couldn't he prevail? The strongest hero in the world was All Might. Years of experience had been accumulated by him. Izuku Midoriya possessed what? Even though he was extremely powerful, he had only recently become so. He wasn't a master of them even if he had one for all and all for one. What danger was there, then? Why would this negative emotion not go away? Conference room, island headquarters. As he slid envelopes to each of his 6 knights along the meeting table, Izuku said, I thought it best to assign all of you code names. He turned to face the 3 former UA students and said, for you 3. They each opened their envelopes to reveal an ID badge bearing their respective code names. Publicly you can still have whatever hero name you so desire, but during your time in my department when out on an assignment you will be referred to as these. Angel. Ochako grinned in response. The wings he gave her must have given him the idea. Shoto read his Fahrenheit, straightforward enough, but he liked that. Tenya scowled at his codename, Quicksilver. Though he would roll over and stick with his hero name of Ingenium, he would have preferred to continue. He turned to the left seats and said, now you 3. The 3 criminals opened their envelopes to read their ID badges. Are still villains wanted by the police, so you will always be referred to by your codenames whenever anyone else is around. You will also be wearing masks to hide your identity. Stain smirked, thinking how apt that word sounded. Guillotine. Himiko pouted her name, Chameleon. Her wish was for something as adorable as Uraraka's. Dabi tilted his head at his name, Dragon. It was kind of nice, he thought. Izuku told them all, do not lose your badges please, you'll need them to gain access to the base. Now on to the next thing. The following week is the big public presentation I'll be giving at Coruscant Stadium. After that we'll be able to move forward with the next step of the plan. Todoroki said, you still haven't told us what you're presenting. Well, since it's almost finished, I guess there's no point in keeping it secret anymore. A touchpad keyboard materialized when the user pushed a few buttons on the table. Izuku entered his access codes and password. A hologram appeared in the middle of the conference table in a short while. It looked like one of the Titan robots, but it was larger and more formidable. This is called Nemesis. It's a robotic peacekeeping unit designed to temporarily replace All Might. With an arrogant demeanor, Stain declared, I still say these walking trash cans will never be able to replace real heroes. They're not supposed to. With false heroes slowly being weeded out, these robots will be needed to pick up the slack. Izuku supplied. Tenya, taking mental notes of everything he was seeing and hearing about this project, asked, are you mass producing this one? No, this time I'm going with a more quality over quantity approach, he explained. Mei and I will just keep upgrading and improving on this one until it becomes obsolete when a human symbol of peace can arise to take the mantle. I've fought these robots many times, they're strong but not that strong, so what makes this one so special? Todoroki questioned. They had no idea that Iida was listening closely to find out everything he could about Nemesis. Izuku boasted, this one is built and designed to fight on par with some of the top heroes. Not that they noticed, but he conveniently omitted the details of the demonstration when he said, next week I'll be presenting this to the public along with a demonstration. Izuku adjourned the meeting with a brief update on their training. Izuku and Stain were the only ones left in the conference room because they needed to have a more private meeting. The man with the gauntlets inquired, so any leads yet? A few. Stain scowled as he took out a tiny plastic bag from his pack and threw it onto the table in front of them. With the gauntlet, he lifted the bag into the air and into his waiting hands, a quirk erasing bullets. Izuku took out one of the tiny metal bullet darts and gave it a close inspection, asking, where did you get these? The former hero killer said in a sinister voice, a small-time gang had a few of them. At first they weren't that willing to part with them, but with a little persuasion, they coughed them up. Eventually. Izuku scowled and threw the bullet back into the bag, saying, this might be a problem in the future. Everything he attempted to accomplish might be destroyed if these were to become more widely available. When he had time, he would need to bring these to the lab for additional examination. Unlike the boy, Stain didn't seem as alarmed by this development, saying, it's not that much of a threat. It only erases a quirk for less than a day. Izuku turned to the man, searching for answers. Still, we need to find out where these bullets are coming from. So far as his investigation could go, no one that I encountered seems to know. It must be a very complex distribution network. He nodded, and the green-haired teen decided to ask something that had been bothering him for a while. Dabi sticks out too much, so I'll be assigning Himiko to assist you in tracking down the source. So what do you think about the next phase? At least Stain had to acknowledge that, saying, well, as much as I still respect him, even I'm not blind to how much weaker he's become. It had been effectively conveyed to him by Midoriya. If we hope to make any real progress, then he'll need to go away. Izuku grinned at him and said, then it looks like we're in agreement. Elsewhere, Bakugo glared at the press group he passed on his way back into the United Arab Emirates, saying, fucking vultures. The media hounds attempted to swamp him and Aizawa, but the teacher was having none of it and gave them a fierce glare in return. He was then instructed to return to the dorms. The ash blonde followed instructions without complaint. After watching those oddball children for another week, Bakugo continued to keep them at a distance, primarily out of fear for himself. However, he kept that from Aizawa, so the man assumed he wasn't really progressing. As he entered the common area, he was greeted with blank looks. Even after Bakugo's classmates found out from Deku, they still refused to speak with him. That bothered him, even though at first he didn't think it would. Yes, the hallucination was accurate. Being by yourself hurt. Bakugo was aware that some of them were likely holding him accountable for Deku's current actions. They most likely held him accountable for the villain's murder of 3 of their classmates. Katsuki decided to ignore the looks and went up to his room, saying, whatever. He was shocked to see someone waiting for him outside his door when he finally got to it. Kirishima said clumsily, not looking him in the eyes, "Hey." As he opened his door, Katsuki moaned, "What do you want?" "I believe we should have a conversation." At last, the redhead raised her head from the floor to address him. Even though he really wanted to say no, to turn the other boy away, he knew he couldn't. "What Midoriya said has been bothering me for a while and I need to know your side of the story." Since Bakugo had already told Hound Dog everything during therapy sessions, it shouldn't be too difficult to do it again. "All right," the blonde said as she opened the door and gestured for him to take a seat at the desk chair. On the bed across from him sat Bakugo. He chose to share the entire story after a protracted, tense silence. He began by stating that he had known Deku since kindergarten. He gave Kirishima an explanation of how his quirk initially appeared while Deku's did not, how he was told he was quirkless when he returned from the doctor one day. He described how he and everyone else began to treat Deku. After summarizing recent events that they were both already aware of, Bakugo ended the story, leaving Kirishima to consider everything that had been said. He had assumed that by getting everything off his chest once more, he would feel better, but he was wrong. The redhead shot him a cold look, saying, "So you're a bully, that's the gist of it." At first, Katsuki wanted to deny it, but he suppressed the urge. He could now acknowledge that he was a bully. He could see that because he had once looked up to Bakugo. "You thought Midoriya was looking down on you when in reality it was the opposite. He was looking up to you." When the blonde heard that, his eyes grew wide. That made sense. Back when they were younger, the nerd would always follow him around. Kirishima got up from his chair and said, "Heroes are supposed to protect the weak and helpless, not belittle and mock them. What you did wasn't manly at all." He was so let down that he had to return to his room and consider everything. Bakugo observed him go. He was done trying to defend his previous deeds, so he didn't bother trying to stop him. Before leaving through the door, Kirishima paused and gave him one last glance. It appeared as though he considered saying more but chose not to. He then departed, shutting the door behind him. "So that's it then," Bakugo said, looking to the ground. He confided all of himself to the friend who was closest to him, and now he too turned away. With a sigh, the blonde asked himself when he would ever get over what he had done and said to Deku. He understood that his previous animosity toward him was terribly misguided, but he still harbored the proper hatred for Deku at this time. That damn nerd was taking the hero system apart and twisting it to fit his perverted beliefs. The person who they both once looked up to, All Might, was even humiliated by the bastard. Deku had to be stopped, regardless of their history together. The real issue was figuring out how. Perhaps if he managed to defeat him, everyone would overlook his actions. It was little, but at this point it was all the hope he had left. After finishing his reflections about a time that seemed so long ago, Izuku sat in his office. It felt like forever that he was a helpless, eccentric nothing with pitiful illusions of being a hero. He whirled in his chair and said, "Izuku, it's time." Uraraka was standing in the doorway. Izuku said, "Yeah, I know," and got up to approach her. She put her hand in the air and gestured for him to stop, but he didn't say anything. Ochako grabbed his tie and pulled it off. She asked, smiling, "You're a super genius with a lot of skill, but you still can't tie a necktie properly?" as she finished it for him. Izuku laughed, a little ashamed. No one's good at everything. When she was done, she gave a nod to her work and paused to notice how attractive he appeared in his well-fitting, cool gray suit. "Should we head out right now?" He heard that the stadium had just reopened and was accepting patrons. In an hour, it would be filled. "Gather the others. We're leaving in 20 minutes, he ordered. With a silent nod, the girl with brown hair turned to fetch Todoroki and Iida. By now, they ought to have completed donning their gear. This evening, he will require everyone to pitch in. "UA, the principal's office," Nezu inquired. "Are you ready?" Toshinori gave a head nod. He was standing there wearing a brown trench coat that hung loosely to conceal his superhero outfit beneath it. "Yes, I am." He was trying to conserve as much of his energy as he could. After all, that's what made him victorious overall for one in their final fight. This madness ends today. The principal reminded everyone to remember, stay in the crowd and don't make a move until I get into Midoriya's files. I'll give the signal, then you can take him. While that's happening, I'll post everything illegal that I found all over the internet and his reputation will be ruined. Toshinori bowed to him, expressing gratitude. Thank you. Whatever happens tonight, you've been a great friend and ally. Nezu bowed respectfully in return, saying, good luck, All Might. You'll always be the symbol of peace. Never forget that. After taking one final glance, the hero left the office and proceeded to the main entrance while still wearing his disguise. However, someone did observe him depart. Someone who trailed him after seeing through the disguise. The gaunt man paused at the sound of the call, All Might. He turned around and noticed that young Bakugo was staring at him. The fiery blonde was outside sipping her coffee. The sight of him and his classmates getting ready to watch Deku's live presentation in the common room was unbearable. The older man interrupted, young Bakugo, you shouldn't be out past curfew. Where are you going? He asked, noticing beneath the dubious trench coat the man's classic hero costume. He quickly made the connection, saying, you're leaving to go fight Deku, aren't you? If by Deku you mean Izuku Midoriya, then yes, I will stop him. The staff members were already fully informed about the dreadful past shared by the two boys. In his opinion, the blonde's treatment of Midoriya was abhorrent. Toshinori was a teacher, though, and he had pledged to lead every one of his pupils, regardless of their prior transgressions, down the correct path toward heroics. Clearly, Bakugo required that guidance the most out of all his students. The boy demanded, take me with you. Out of the blue. Toshinori paused and gave the boy a look before saying, I can fight. I can help. He was obviously trying to help him, but he could not let that happen. He was honest with the boy, saying, look, young Bakugo, I appreciate the offer, but I can't let you risk your life. With his fists clenched, Bakugo lowered his head and asked, do you hate me, All Might? Toshinori was taken aback by the question and his eyes widened. What makes you think that? Bakugo tilted his head up to look him in the eyes. Deku said that your fight with the boss of the league weakened you. If it wasn't for me getting kidnapped by those freaks, you wouldn't have had to fight that guy. Do you hate me for making you weaker? Toshinori sighed and said, young Bakugo, he told the boy, you didn't do anything wrong. He gave it a lot of thought before deciding to tell Katsuki the truth about his oddity and its background. More people knowing his secret than allowing the blonde to continue believing he's destroyed the career of the world's greatest hero is what he would rather have. Bakugo summarized, so your quirk is passed on from person to person. All Might affirmed, that's right. Bakugo lost it at that. And Deku managed to find a way to steal it and put into his stone. Not only that, but he's also in possession of your enemy's quirk all for one. All Might nodded at him, yeah, that's what makes him so formidable right now. He wasn't even taking into account the possibility that All Might lose this fight. Now you're going to go kick his ass in public to get everyone back on your side and put the nerd away forever. How much power Deku stole didn't matter. That is simply the way the world is. Heroes always triumph over villains. It's not about getting the public on my side, it's about stopping Midoriya before he goes too far. Toshinori corrected. He no longer gives a damn about what people think. That's what initially cost him almost everything. Bakugo wanted to be there to stop Deku, saying, take me with you. I can help. The boy angrily said, young Bakugo, I can't ask you to risk your life. Katsuki yelled, I signed up for that when I got into this damn school. Toshinori touched the blonde's shoulder with a slender hand. He left no opportunity for debate when he said, young Bakugo, stay here. Become a great hero. Be better than me and better than who you used to be. A stunned young man, unable to shake the terrible feeling that something terrible was going to happen tonight, watched as the man gave the boy one last smile before putting his hat on and leaving the school grounds. Whether he was going insane or not was a mystery to Bakugo. It's not as though Deku could defeat All Might in reality. He would, however, ensure for himself that the hero would prevail just to be safe. Subsequent Coruscant Stadium, the complex as a whole was enormous and very sophisticated. Toshinori had already seen everything once. He has previously won multiple awards and attended a number of significant events. He used to be very proud and happy to come here. It felt to him now that he was marching into battle and that this place would turn into the front lines. Toshinori, blending in with the crowd, cast a worried glance at every civilian expected to attend this presentation. Since the venue hosted athletic events, the walls dividing the arena from the stadium seats were lined with shields and armor plating. The gaunt man made sure to look around for anyone who might be employed by Midoriya as soon as he entered. In particular, they were almost certain that the masked agent was the hero killer. He was surprised to see that nobody in the slightest appeared suspicious. Just the standard security personnel that watched over the stadium. Toshinori was not even aware that the boy had Titan robots with him. "Oh, please excuse me," a woman said as she nearly fell to the ground after running into him. However, the hero in disguise intervened by placing a hand on her wrist. With an apologetic smile, she said, "Sorry, I wasn't watching where I was going." He gave her a quick once-over and said, "It's all right." He chose to let her go because she was an ordinary-looking dark-haired woman and not at all suspicious, and he continued on to the area where people were getting seated for the show. If he had looked closer, he would have noticed the woman's sinister grin behind his back. She spun around, blending in with the throng, then put a finger to the communicator in her ear. She whispered, "He's here, just like you said." A voice on the other end laughed and said, "Good work, Himiko." When he returned with All Might, he was shown to a seat along an aisle in an upper section that provided him with a clear view of the main arena. He saw a stage set up at the north end, a podium in front of it and a big screen behind it. Assuming that was Midoriya's location, Toshinori immediately began formulating a strategy for handling this. 10 minutes or so later, the last few guests had taken their seats, filling the stadium to capacity. The stadium lights eventually faded into darkness, and the arena began to light up. The slender blonde man observed as a portal appeared on the stage, revealing 3 individuals who were the disguised hero's classmates. And Ochako Uraraka came first. She had something that looked like folded-up metal wings on her back and was completely armored in white. Her brown hair was loose and her face was exposed due to the protective helmet covering her forehead and sides of her head. Additionally, the helmet had an apparent transparent lens in the color of pink covering her left eye. What followed looked a lot like the hero costume of a different former Class 1A student. Toshinori recognized this person as Tenya Iida. His new knightly armor had no cape and was primarily white with silver accents. He probably used the armored silver guards on the front of his shins to increase the amount of damage he could do with his kicks. Like Uraraka's helmet, his had a blue lens covering his left eye as well. The next person to pass through the portal was Shoto Todoroki, the son of the now disgraced and eccentric former number 2 hero Endeavor. He was covered in white armor only on his forearms, shins, and chest. A gray bodysuit designed for movement encased the remainder of his arms and legs. The lower portion of Todoroki's face was hidden by a thick white scarf that was wrapped around his collar and shoulders and fell behind him like 2 long tails. 2 metal sheaths holding what All Might assumed to be swords rested on his back. Unlike the other 2, Shoto didn't wear a helmet, but he did have a red lens covering his left eye fixed to his ear. Izuku Midoriya eventually closed the portal and walked out. In contrast to his new allies, he lacked combat gear. He didn't need armor, though, because he had that infinity gauntlet securely fastened to his left arm. Rather, he was attired in his customary light gray suit, paired with a dark green tie that complemented his hair and a black button-down shirt underneath. When the director of the Hero Regulation Department appeared, the crowd quieted down. With a smile, Izuku approached the podium. All Might watched him and the 3 out of 4 former UA students who fell victim to his manipulations in silence. "Good evening, everyone. I'm happy so many wonderful citizens could make it here to this defining moment." While back at the UA, Nezu took another big sip of his tea as he eventually found what he was searching for. "Okay, let's see what we got here." The Hero Regulation Department's confidential government documents. It was not an easy task to break into. His connections in the government could only take him so far. Someone with his level of access was not allowed to access deeper restricted files. He went through the various files and said, "We have the agreement between Geonosis Tech and the HRD for the rights to the Titan design. It appears that the company received a substantial payment in fair compensation, which was authorized by Prime Minister Midoriya. That was just a normal government-funded weapons commission. Nothing particularly incriminating. Sadly, there is no information available regarding the gauntlet that gave Midoriya her power. It appeared that no one in high places knew or comprehended how it operated, and the boy would not be stupid enough to preserve any documentation describing how he made it. The talking animal discovered a rather interesting file and asked, "KOB training plan?" This one included information on 3 previous UA pupils. He let out a sorrowful sigh, contemplating the loss of these bright, in-training heroes. The information in the files pertaining to them was already in the school's possession. What is this? Nezu saw a file that appeared to be very restricted. Secret operatives was the label on this one. That seemed to be precisely what he was searching for. He didn't realize the lure was dangling in front of him, but with a little effort, he was able to open this locked file. Upon opening it, the principal found only a video and no other information. He took it open. Something that Nezu would quickly come to regret. Hello. Izuku Midoriya was seated at his desk when the video began. The white creature's eyes expanded as it said, "Snooping through some files I see." That did not even remotely calm Nezu down. Before you start panicking, it's important that you know this is just a video recording. Let's deduce who's probably watching this video. The only one with access to these files are the Prime Minister and myself. The only person with the intellect and reason to break into this is most likely that rodent principal of UA. Probably looking for something incriminating that can be used against me or info about my future plans, isn't that right, Mr. Nezu? He glared sharply into the camera, making the well-dressed animal swallow nervously. Izuku leaned in and asked, "When will you people get it through your thick skulls? You can't beat me at this game I started, while the rest of you were living it up with your quirks and fulfilling your dreams. I, who was ignored and shunned, sitting in the back of the room, had nothing but time to not only figure out the key to limitless power, but also how to use it." He snapped at the screen. "I planned out every move I would make once I had the completed gauntlet, and I even planned out what people like you and All Might would do to try and stop me." He smirked at the camera. His final words before the video cut off were, "Speaking of All Might, I need to go and get ready for the big show." When the principal saw the ramifications of that, he paled. It appears that the stadium presentation was a hoax. All Might had to be warned. He tried to contact the man right away after grabbing his phone. It answered a few rings later. "Maybe listen, you should," he said, cut off by the sound of a schoolgirl laughing. Himiko Toga's voice could be heard on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, All Might can't come to the phone now, but if you'd like to leave a message I'll be sure that he gets it." She then laughed once more and hung up. Nezu nearly called the other teachers in a panic, but he quickly stopped himself. If academics from the University of Arizona turned up to support All Might, the political fallout might be catastrophic. That's probably already known to Midoriya. No, he was well aware of that. As he claimed, everything was meticulously planned out. Nezu thought, "There's one person I can call." His only hope was that they arrived on time. Returning to the stadium, Izuku told the audience, "We are on the cusp of a new era. For too long we were comfortable with good enough, but good enough is longer going to cut it in this day and age. We can't rely on media-addicted celebrities, abusive power-hungry fools, and old weak men who all pretend to be heroes." He paused as he looked out into the stands. Though All Might was certain he was staring at him directly, he was not able to see that far. At one end of the arena, the doors opened, revealing a large silhouette standing in the entryway. "We need something more, something better, we all deserve better," he announced to the curious and intrigued audience. "This is the first step." As they entered the arena's center, everyone was able to get a clear view of it. The machine resembled the top hero in both size and shape, standing tall and hefty. Little hexagonal scales that covered the robot must have been its armor. The head was shaped like a human, with 2 protruding horns from either side and no mouth. The silver armor of the robot gleamed brilliantly as the spotlights struck it. Izuku grinned at the looming masterpiece that he and Mei had created and said, "In ancient Greek mythology there was a deity that inflicted divine punishment on those who committed evil deeds. I give you Nemesis, our new symbol of peace that will protect our society until a human hero can rise to position." So that's his plan, All Might thought to himself, realizing that Midoriya was trying to supplant him completely. He could concede that the plan was sound, but a heartless machine could never replace a true hero. Midoriya hinted that this Nemesis robot was only temporary because he seemed to understand that. Izuku started as the robot stopped moving to take a position in front of the stage, saying, Nemesis is the ultimate culmination of technology and proper hero ideology. This is how justice will be delivered to the villains of this world. Nemesis, unlike All Might, won't lie to you all and isn't limited by old age. The robot bowed to the audience and turned its face away from Izuku, as per its programming. The entire stadium let out a cheer, evidently impressed by Midoriya's statement and the machine. Izuku turned to face the people gathered in the stadium and said, "For years our so-called symbol of peace lied to us about his own power. By doing so he led us all astray, thinking that only those born with great power can be heroes. With conviction, he declared, I say to you all now, people make heroes, not power makes them. We create our heroes, therefore we have a responsibility to make sure the right candidates are elevated to the positions. No more frauds, no more liars. This time we will do things right." Izuku paused as the audience applauded him. Every one of them agreed with what he was saying. While wondering why Nezu hadn't yet given him the signal, All Might reached for his phone. He reasoned that it must have fallen out of his pocket when he ran into that unknown woman when he couldn't find it. Yet he was at his breaking point. It was either now or never. Midoriya spoke once more just before Toshinori got up to head to the arena. "All Might is here among us right now." There were murmurs from the crowd everywhere. "I invite him to come forward and join me here in the arena. Come All Might and face your lies and deceit." Toshinori was not at all surprised to hear that this was all a trap. Midoriya had repeatedly shown that he was capable of outwitting those who opposed him. Resolving to waste no more time, he got up from his chair. As the man got up and the spotlights turned to face him, Izuku whispered to himself, "There you are." Toshinori's thin face was visible when he removed his hat. The sight of the once universally adored hero made the audience gasp. He began his descent of the steps in the direction of the arena. Izuku's green eyes followed him the entire time. A satisfied smirk tilted his mouth. When All Might finally got to the bottom, he emerged into the open field and moved a few yards away from the platform that Midoriya and the three former students were standing on. All Might just looked at him silently. "Please All Might, is there anything you wish to say to the public? Anything you want to apologize for or own up to? Now's your chance to clear the air. What difference would it make what he said in public? Besides, deeds speak louder than words. He would still say his piece, though. You've done enough, Midoriya. This is enough now. You need to stop before this goes too far," Toshinori told him. Izuku spoke into the microphone so that everyone could hear. "Enough? Who are you to decide when I've done enough? All I'm trying to do is improve society and give the world the true heroes that we deserve. What exactly are you doing here?" Toshinori removed the trench coat to reveal the baggy hero costume underneath, saying, "I'm putting an end to this once and for all." Once more, the audience gasped. Izuku was unable to contain his smirk. It was precisely what he desired. The green-haired teen sighed and turned to face the bleachers. "Well, I refuse to stand down and you refuse to let me accomplish my goal of improving society. So the only solution is, of course, violence. I would like to ask all of you to leave Coruscant Stadium for your own safety. Please leave in an orderly fashion and remember who it was that came here looking to start a fight." All Might narrowed his eyes at him. This had to have been part of his strategy to make more people dislike him. The hero did nothing but stand there as Uraraka, Todoroki, and Iida went off to assist in clearing the stands, leaving the two of them by themselves to just silently gaze at each other. The robot that Izuku had shown him had moved to take a position behind him. Not that All Might was in the slightest interested in another mechanical abomination the boy created. It required almost 15 minutes for the stadium to be free of uninvolved spectators. It was at that moment that Toshinori spoke again. The boy could be thanked by the hero for having the grace to allow those who were not involved in this to escape. "Thank you for letting the people leave." Izuku clarified, "I like to try and reduce collateral damage whenever possible." He grinned down from his podium at the hero who still hadn't changed into a different form, saying, "The cameras are still running so everyone will still get to see this moment. There won't be any audio though so you can speak freely. Go on All Might. Tell me how much you hate me." With honesty, the gaunt man said, "I don't hate you, Midoriya." "Really?" Izuku was taken aback by that. "I stole one for all from you and acquired all for one. I revealed your secret to the world and still you don't hate me?" The boy glared at All Might, who stopped and said, "Of course not. I understand why you did all this. I was in your shoes once. He yelled. No you weren't. You got lucky, All Might. You got lucky that you met Nana Shimura and she took pity on you and made you the next inheritor of One for All. What about the rest of the quirkless trash of society? Where's our chance? I understand now that I made a mistake, exclaimed the hero. He clenched his fists tightly and said, I promise things will be different from now on. I promise I won't let the world fall back into what it was. The world that hurt you and others like you. Izuku spit out, you had your chance, now it's my turn. Looking at him, All Might said, I'm warning you now, Midoriya. His body abruptly buffed up into his larger-than-life muscular form, complete with filling out his hero costume, saying, if you don't come quietly, I won't hold back. Izuku tilted his head, asking, is that a threat? Did you just threaten the director of the Hero Regulation Department? All Might, bent at the knees and ready to leap at him, asked, what do you think? Iida stood watchfully in the now vacant stands. Uraraka used her mechanical wings to hover above the stadium, giving her a bird's-eye perspective of the impending battle. Observing with great interest were Stain, Dabi, and Himiko in one of the skybox rooms. Neither All Might nor Izuku had moved yet. As the hero shot through the air, bridging the gap between them in an instant, the tension finally reached a crescendo. He lifted his fist, swallowed his guilt, and got ready to strike the boy's smug face with a crushing blow. If not for the unexpected presence of a silver mechanical hand the size of his, which stopped his knuckles inches from Midoriya's freckled cheeks, he would have. The wind had picked up, causing his tie to get tangled and his untidy green hair to blow back, but he was unharmed at all. Izuku started to study the man's clenched fist and said, oh dear. As All Might's startled eyes followed the metal hand, they saw that it was the robot Midoriya built to take his place as the symbol of peace. It appears someone wasn't paying attention to my little presentation. Izuku hastily straightened his tie as Nemesis twisted its metal body and flung the hero back across the arena with startling force. Allow me to reintroduce you. All Might say hello to Nemesis. Toshinori was forced to press his heels into the pavement in order to prevent himself from moving forward. With a menacing display, Nemesis stepped between one of its two creators and the hero who attempted to harm him, stomping its large metal foot. All Might growled silently, you're going to have a machine fight me again? This was not the outcome he had in mind for this. He had tried to save as much of his meager strength as he could for his battle with Midoriya. This bucket of bolts couldn't be the reason he was wasting it. What better way to display what Nemesis can do by pitting him against the hero-turned-villain All Might, he said pointedly. Toshinori retorted, I'm not a villain, you are now. Charged Izuku. The situation his opponent found himself in made him laugh. You made a conscious effort to attack a government official. The cameras are televising all of this live. Even if you defeat Nemesis and by some stretch of a miracle defeat me, you'll be publicly despised by everyone. Those with weak quirks already don't like you anymore, the quirkless absolutely loathe you, but right now the rest of society is merely wary of you, but still holding on to the idea of you. The Gauntlet user explained. At this point, Toshinori realized what was going on. Tonight that image will be destroyed, by either me or yourself. The only way this society can move on is if we learn to let go of this image of All Might being a perfect hero. He loses if he beats Midoriya and he loses if Midoriya beats him. He was unable to even flee, as that would further damage his reputation. In the game of Izuku's Midoriya, this was checkmate. All Might abruptly said, it doesn't matter what happens to me today. You can destroy my reputation, you can ruin my image, but there will be someone who can take up the mantle of symbol of peace. He stated proudly. His replacement would be Mirio Tagata. That boy had something more than one for everyone, or perhaps it was just his peculiarity. The only thing he regretted was not appointing the boy as his successor sooner. He had to face his other regret now that it was in front of him. All Might, no, that voice was one he knew. He turned around and saw Bakugo in his full hero gear and costume at the arena entrance. Why was he in this place? The blonde launched herself across the field with her explosions, giving him no time to think. Unexpectedly, a wall of fire split the arena, preventing him from assisting the hero. What the hell? Izuku exclaimed, oh, this is just perfect, as she rejoiced in the unanticipated development. As he was saying, sorry Katsuki Bakugo, but you weren't invited to this show. However, if you want to fight someone, I know someone that can oblige you. Bakugo saw a figure slowly approaching him from out of the flames. Todoroki emerged from behind his fiery wall. Todoroki gave him a vile glare and said, "You shouldn't be here, Bakugo. Icy hot. Let out Katsuki, so you threw yourself in with Deku too." As he approached, the boy with two tones said, "I don't see how that's any of your business." With each step, patches of ice form on the ground. "I can't allow you to interfere. If you don't leave, then I'm placing you under arrest." Bakugo adopted a combat stance, saying, "Yeah. You just try." Todoroki extracted his two swords from their sheaths by reaching behind his back. Izuku was ecstatic to hear this. All Might and Bakugo, the two I hate the most, together in one place. Unfortunately, UA was exerting every effort to contain Bakugo, so he was unable to get the justification he needed to punish the boy appropriately. Izuku had a legitimate reason to take offense at his outburst now that he'd finally crossed the boundary. He just needed to relax, observe, and bide his time until Fahrenheit defeated him. Bakugo vs. Todoroki. Gleaming embers spurted from Shoto's left sword as icy mist covered its blade. Bakugo wasted no time in charging in his direction. He had to get this done quickly so he could assist All Might. The man had a limited amount of fighting time. Now he was aware of that. A simple assault, Todoroki reasoned, would be his first move. He also received a quick readout of his level from the scouter device, alerting him to the impending emergence of his quirk. He swung his right sword, sending the blonde flying in an arc of ice. Shit. Bakugo cursed silently as he narrowly avoided the explosion. The ice had gotten faster, he noticed, or maybe the swords were amplifying his oddity. In any case, it appears that he has improved significantly since their bout at the athletic event. Eat this. Bakugo swung around the ice, attempting to blow his opponent up, but he ran into a solid object that shielded him. With his sword extended in a defensive manner, he created an ice shield around the blade. Todoroki launched a fiery spear at Katsuki by pushing his left sword over his shield. The blonde, whose eyes widened in shock at the new move, was barely spared by the attack. Then Bakugo made the decision to approach. As much as he hated to admit it, Icy Hot was superior to him in terms of range. I got him. The goal of these long-range strikes was to draw the adversary near. He would now demonstrate to him how much his close-quarters fighting had improved. Todoroki suddenly and gracefully swung his two blades at Bakugo, taking him by surprise. It was all worthwhile to train with the hero killer's sword. Katsuki maneuvered around the swings by ducking and weaving, deflecting some of the blows with his grenade gauntlets. This was unexpected and novel coming from the dual quirk user. At close range, he appeared to be every bit as dangerous as he was at a distance. Hurry up, little bastard. Gritting his teeth, Bakugo shot an explosion straight at the space between them. Their vision was obscured by the dust and debris that was kicked up. That was Bakugo's belief. He had no idea that the scouter covering Todoroki's left eye had been following him through the smoke. Bakugo was only able to witness the severing of the cloud into two halves by the red, luminous blade. The weapon's flat side struck his face when he was unable to avert it in time. Katsuki yelled, "Damn it!" As he was thrown back. It would be easier for him to lay into Icy Hot if he could remove those weapons from him. With his right gauntlet pin removed, he pointed it straight at Todoroki and fired. Shoto said, in response to the enormous explosion that was coming his way. He simply directed all of his fire into his left sword, swinging it in a downward arc. His flames absorbed Bakugo's destructive blast and continued on towards the blonde opponent, completely overwhelming it. As Katsuki was blown away, he exclaimed, "Gah!" His back struck the arena wall behind him with excruciating force. Todoroki approached him slowly, building thick ice walls to his left and right to obstruct any escape attempts and keep him confined. His wall of flames was destroyed by a shockwave from the other fight before he had a chance to turn around. "You know how much you remind me of my father," Shoto said, observing the other teenager straighten his legs once more. "You're just as self-centered and egotistical as he was. As a matter of fact, I think you're worse than him." Bakugo gasped and straightened himself, saying, "Yeah, and what do you know?" Todoroki glanced at him, his bicolored eyes narrowed. "Midoriya told me everything about you. You're no hero, you're just bully. picking on those weaker than you for no other reason than you simple can. Even now you're probably just here for yourself, you don't care about anything else. He is correct, isn't he? Katsuki once more heard Deku's voice inside his mind. Conceited and haughty. Where are the stupid people who idolized you now that they've turned you into this pampered brat? The voice made fun of him. Yes, that is correct. Kachan, welcome to the real world. Perhaps they were accurate about him. Perhaps he really had no one in the real world. But Katsuki couldn't help but think of Kirishima. While he constantly gave him praise, he also didn't hesitate to correct him when he did something inappropriate or unmanly. Naturally, his first instinct was to explode on him, but the redhead never gave a damn, always taking things in stride and grinning sharply. He was most likely the first true friend he had made since he expelled Deku from his group years prior for lacking eccentricity. Something he now regretted having done. I failed the last friend I had, Bakugo said, feeling ashamed as he glanced at the ground. If nobody had ever wanted you to win in the first place, what good was it to win? Even though he was truly alone, that didn't mean he would give up and allow Deku to rule the world as he pleased. Bakugo snarled, "Just shut up." Stomping his feet, he launched himself through the air, doing several flips to avoid the flying icicles and flames, declaring, "I didn't come here to be lectured by one of Deku's lapdogs." Grabbing one of Todoroki's scarf ends, he landed behind him and pulled him off his feet. Then Katsuki nailed him in the back with multiple detonations. Shoto was out of breath and exclaimed, "K!" He crashed face first into the earth, losing control of his ice sword. The blonde pinned Shoto in place by putting his boot down on his left wrist, stopping him from swinging his fire sword. Bakugo momentarily lost sight of the fact that Todoroki could still use his quirk while brandishing a sword just as he was about to finish him off with a fast knockout. The bicolored teenager struck the ground with his right hand, causing a pillar of ice to shoot up and strike the explosive teen in surprise before bouncing off of him. Shoto immediately got back up on his feet by toppling over and creating more ice beneath him. This time, he would not give Bakugo an opportunity to recover. Leaping forward and discarding his weapons, he created more ice around his armored gauntlet and used it to strike the blonde hard in the stomach. He countered with a couple of kicks, then tanked a couple more point-blank explosions before using his other fist to fire punch Katsuki into the wall and across the floor. Bakugo panted and coughed, saying, "Fuck." As Todoroki seized him by the throat, a shadow fell over him. Ice quickly wrapped around him from the neck down and then released him, sending red eyes glaring into multicolored ones. With the blonde fully confined, only his snarling head was free to scream profanities. Shoto was unconcerned. All he did was turn around and pick up his fallen swords, placing them back in their sheaths on his back. After dabbing a small amount of blood from his brow, he turned to see All Might's battle come to an end. Nemesis versus All Might. Izuku smiled and leaned forward to rest his elbows on the podium, saying, "Oh my. You seem to be stuck between a rock and hard place, All Might. Alright, so how difficult can this really be?" As the robot charged at him, Toshinori pondered. Although Midoriya was an expert in technology, a machine could never match his superhuman strength. Nemesis mimicked All Might's move by raising his fist as well. A tiny shockwave was created when their punches collided in the center. Man and machine remained motionless. All Might remarked that the robot's armor wasn't even dented, saying, "Okay, it's pretty tough." Mei made huge improvements to the prototype shock-absorbing armor plating. Izuku explained. Nemesis is built to take your strongest hits. Go on, name an American state and shout smash at the top of your lungs. See what happens, he shouted at the former hero. Tenya longed to be able to intervene as he watched the fights from the stands. He would expose himself as a spy if he did. He had to remain motionless to avoid raising Midoriya's suspicions. Nemesis and All Might started exchanging blows. The device repeatedly targeted the hero's weak point because it was programmed with information about him that came directly from Midoriya. All Might needed to remain vigilant and guard his old wound. He could probably be taken out with a good blow. Izuku was excited as she watched the fight. Everything was proceeding according to schedule. He had orchestrated this entire show as a complex ruse to entice All Might to appear in public. But that was insufficient. He required everyone to ultimately turn against their adored hero. Only by putting an end to their fervent worship of All Might once and for all would society be able to move forward. After informing the Prime Minister of this, he helped the man persuade Yagi Toshinori to attempt an open capture of him. Thus, All Might was declared a villain, ending this chapter of history and beginning a new one. All Might struck the robot squarely in the face with his fist. Its left eye was slightly flickering, but its face was unharmed. In response, Nemesis kicked the hero in the leg, hoping to break it. Toshinori leapt skyward to avoid it. Grasping both of the robot's arms, he positioned his feet against its chest. He pushed hard, using the muscles in his legs. He came to the realization that he would have to attempt disassembling the robot since he couldn't break through its armor. To his surprise, it really did the trick. The limbs were ripped from the body, causing the metal and internal hydraulics to groan and screech. Interesting. He managed to get beyond the armor that absorbed shocks. Izuku saw his and Mei's labor destroyed. In a desperate attempt, Nemesis's chest parted, unleashing an energy beam that was aimed directly at the hero. Though being a hero and years of training gave All Might good reaction time, he didn't expect this. This gave him the opportunity to sidestep the cannon and strike the robot's head with such force that it broke its eyes and destroyed its digital brain. Todoroki's wall of fire was destroyed by the massive shockwave created by the impact alone. Its remaining body fell to the ground motionless. Turning to face a still smiling Midoriya, All Might panted, "So much for your new symbol of peace." Izuku shrugged casually, "That was just a prototype. I honestly didn't expect him to win." He was confident Mei would rise to the occasion, saying, "But you have given me a lot of valuable battle data that will be used to make a new improved nemesis." Seeing her baby destroyed would probably inspire her to build a bigger and better one. All Might yelled at him, "You won't get the chance to make another one. This ends here, Midoriya." Izuku stepped forward off the stage to confront the man, backhanded the podium out of his way. Izuku turned to face him fearlessly and said, "Yes, this will end here, but for you. No more games, All Might. Give me your best shot and I'll give you mine. Take me seriously for once and hit me with everything." Toshinori pushed the remaining guilt aside and reared his fist back, saying, "Fine if that is what you want." The ground shook and cracked beneath Midoriya's feet, and the 5 stones on the Infinity Gauntlet glowed brightly, proclaiming, "Excellent." His left sleeve blew off his body, and he cried out, "Infinity Gauntlet 100% output." His skin was covered in neon veins as the energy surrounding him crackled and surged. His eyes glowed through all the hues of the stones, pushing up his hair. As Izuku raised his arm to deliver his own blow, the whole stadium shook. This was a short-lived form for him. That was the main point of the ordeal. He ran the risk of destroying his body if he used it to its maximum potential for more than one attack. United State Ofa. Infinity. Both gave voice to the first of their final, powerful blows, and threw their fists forward in 2 decisive blows. As their attacks collided, Izuku and All Might exclaimed, "SMASH." The force of their impact nearly toppled the stadium walls and shattered the earth all around them. If Ochako hadn't used the tethers in her wings to grab the edge of the wall, she would have been nearly blown away. Since Todoroki was closest to the epicenter, he had to stab his blades into the earth. Iida took shelter in the bleachers. The 3 ex-villains gripped their seats tightly as the windows of the skyboxes were instantly shattered. Toga was continuously giggling with delight and encouraging Izuku. All Might was taken aback to discover that his fist was just inches away from Midoriya's tightly balled fist outside the arena. He was unable to even come into contact with the boy due to the intense energy the device was generating. Not only that, but the boy was still standing firm, and the last remnants of One for All were fast fading. The gauntlet's force pushed Toshinori back, and his body began to slowly contract. Indeed. Gasping in shock and amazement, Izuku began to overwhelm All Might's most powerful attack. Even though he was quite sure of his strength and gauntlet, a small doubt lurked in the back of his mind. His eyes had gone wide with surprise at seeing himself win. Subsequently, he delivered a powerful blow to the hero's chest, breaking his arm. This was his Infinity Smash. All Might's bloody, steam-covered body was hurled out of Coruscant Stadium and struck an abandoned skyscraper nearby. Bakugo exclaimed, "All Might," after seeing the impossibility unfold before his very eyes. He lashed out at the ice that had imprisoned him, screaming. Fortunately, the ice was cracked and weakened by the explosive force of those 2 attacks, which allowed him to free one arm and blast the remaining portion off. Too preoccupied to notice Bakugo's escape, Todoroki was staring in shock at All Might's defeat. "Izuku!" Ochako exclaimed as he hung in the middle of the field, watching the energy surrounding the boy with green hair dissipate. She noticed that he was still standing there, his fist raised, and his expression was one of utter disbelief. "Izuku," was her next call. He muttered, I did it." Izuku was shocked by what he had just done. Using science and technology, he overcame the greatest hero. He unequivocally demonstrated that eccentricities are not everything. Not only is that power scalable, but it can also be enhanced. He cleared his throat quickly, lowered his fist, and awkwardly brushed the dust off his suit. At last, he said to her, "I'm okay," as though nothing had changed. Ochako said, "Bakugo escaped. Do you want me to go after him?" "No, Angel. The Titans will track him. You go retrieve All Might," Izuku ordered. Since the man was probably unconscious, it was best to arrest him right away. He was grinning again, saying, "Bring him here and I'll warp him directly to Tartarus." The overwhelming sense of victory beginning to take hold. She wanted to bow, but it was difficult to do so while suspended in midair, so she said, "As you command." Ochako's jets fired, causing her mechanical wings to flap once more, propelling her upward and out of the stadium. With a chuckle that gradually turned into full-blown laughter, Izuku said, "Let this be the final chapter in the story of All Might." Ochako shot in the direction of the structure that the hero's body collided with. She was sorry for him, but there was no other choice. As much as she didn't like the plan, she had to concede to Izuku's reasoning since she had already told her why All Might needed to be removed from the picture. She entered the building through the skyscraper's opening when she got there. She couldn't remember the name of the office building owned by the company. She discovered a human-shaped imprint on the floor while searching through the wreckage, but there was no human that matched it. He must have been seriously hurt based on the volume of blood, so where did he flee to? She found the emergency stairwell door by following a trail of red life fluid, which appeared to have been blasted off its hinges by a bomb and was still smoldering. Angel sighed, realizing who had to have arrived first. Bakugo. Elsewhere, Bakugo threw the thin, frail man formerly known as All Might onto his back and exclaimed, "Hang on, All Might." He skirted the main streets and ran through the dim alleys. "I'll get that recovery hag to fix you up." Barely conscious, Toshinori wheezed, "Not Ua." It was true that Midoriya will. No, and it stopped Bakugo in his tracks. Deku would go to the United States of America first in search of All Might. Probably even with his metalheads in place now. He was unsure of their options, though. Hospitals were out of the question, and bringing him home would have put his parents' safety at risk. This was a mistaken moment of indecision, because two Titans had finally found him and appeared at one end of the alley. "Shit," uttered Bakugo. He was unable to defend All Might and battle these creatures at the same time. By now, they've probably also informed Deku. For them, this was not looking good. A yellow blur quickly knocked off the heads of the robots as they marched towards them. Gran Torino landed next to them and exclaimed, "You look like crap, Toshinori." The man, bloodied and gaunt, had barely enough strength to grin pitifully. He coughed up more blood onto Katsuki's shoulder, saying, "Been better. Looks like they might succeed after all." Unfortunately, their hopes were short-lived as 4 more Titans showed up, obstructing the alley on both ends. Bakugo was about to set All Might down and assist the old-timer when he glared at the machines. "You wanna go half and half on these fucking rust buckets?" Gran Torino grinned, "No need. I didn't come alone." Each Titan's head was crushed by someone from behind in a matter of seconds. The unidentified intruder appeared to vanish into the earth and resurface behind them before they could identify and photograph it. The loud, enthusiastic shout was the last thing the robots heard before they were permanently turned off. "Power. Let's see your quirk slip and slide lets you turn any surface you touch slick and smoother." Apotheosis tapped his pen along the edge of his notebook in thought. "You could use this for quick escapes like we discussed." "Yes, I've tried to use it to trip up police and heroes by slicking up the streets and sidewalk, but that causes me and my gang to trip too." The tan skinny thug dressed in leather and chains said. He'd been having trouble finding a practical use for his quirk. He's pretty much nothing more than a joke to the other members of the gang at this point. And you can't switch it off on command, it simply wears off over time. Izuku hummed in thought at this conundrum. He started tapping his pen along his scarf-covered mouth. He wasn't the first low-class villain and criminal to come to him for advice on better ways to use his quirk. Ever since word got out that he could analyze quirks, break them down, and come up with new applications for them, these low-lives started flocking to him. Izuku didn't complain though. This was exactly what he wanted to help him find quirks that could be used for his Infinity Gauntlet. Perhaps some cleated shoes for yourself and your comrades so you all can keep your balance and not be hindered by your quirk. If you could learn how to skate, then maybe you could glide on the slick surfaces. Or maybe it could be used to help move heavy objects. He started speaking a mile a minute. A common habit these thugs were used to. Excuse me, but are you the one they call Apotheosis? Their little meeting was cut short by a newcomer. I need to have a word with you. Izuku stopped his scribbling and looked up to see someone dressed in a white long coat with what looked like a modern plague doctor mask. I'm busy, come back later. Izuku told him. I don't have time for that. A long tendril shaped like the hand of a clock extended out from underneath his hood, stopping at the thug's face. Leave. Izuku's client paled and stood up, quickly taking off. Impatient much. Please step into my office. Izuku joked since his office consisted of two beaten-up rusted desk chairs in a corner of the underground parking garage. He gestured to the seat opposite him, but the bird-masked man preferred to stand. I'm here representing the Shi Hasaikai. I assume you've heard of us, he started. Yes, I've heard of all the old-school Yakuza groups that are slowly fading away to memory. Izuku mocked. Just like quirkless people, organized crime families were dying breeds. Well, we've heard of your exploits as a criminal consultant and my boss would like to offer you a job. The masked man ignored his jab and laid his offer on the table. Your analytical skills would be very valuable to our organization and our leader would... He was interrupted when the boy raised his gloved hand. I'm going to stop you right there. Izuku frowned underneath his scarf. I'm a freelance consultant, which means that I get to pick and choose my clients. I really enjoy that freedom. So why should I shackle myself to an organization that I know nothing about, let alone an organization that's probably on its last legs? If you knew what I know, you'd accept the offer. That tone of his voice sounded dangerous. Is that some sort of threat? Izuku chuckled. Am I being threatened by the lackey of a Yakuza group that's struggling to survive? He was acting tough, but it was all a ruse. He lacked a quirk and had yet to finish his prototype force field generator, so he had no means to defend himself. Bluffing. A lesson he picked up very quickly while around criminals. First of all, Kai Chisaki is not someone that you say no to, he said while simultaneously naming his boss. Secondly, he's working on something big that will put the Shi Hasaikai back on the map. You could be part of that if you did the smart thing and take the offer he's generously giving you. I'm going to pass. Izuku had already decided before the other finished his sentence. While I'm a bit intrigued to see what this Chisaki thinks will bring the Yakuza back from the abyss, as a small-time villain I'm not really looking to make a big splash at the moment. Even then I plan on debuting alone when that time comes. Plus, as I've already said, your group's a dying breed and I don't want to be there when it finally goes belly up. Alright, have it your way. Another arrow-shaped tendril extended out from under his hood. I'll just bring you to Kai and you can tell that to his face and we'll see what that gets you. The appendage stopped an inch away from his face as the click of a cocked gun was heard. That's our little hired brain that you're messing with. That very gun was pressed to the back of the bird-masked man's head. Izuku just chuckled seeing that backup had finally arrived. Allow me to properly introduce you. Say hi to the C-ranked villain known as Shackle Bolt, leader of the chain gang. You met one of their members a few minutes ago. He was that man you rudely shooed away. The Yakuza representative turned slowly to see a large burly man with a spiked mohawk, dressed in leather with chains wrapped around his sleeves. Behind him were the rest of the gang, some pointing guns at him and some holding bats wrapped in chains and barbed wire. Shackle Bolt. This Issa, I'm sorry I didn't get your name. Izuku was very amused, they could tell by his tone. It's Chronostasis to you. He finally introduced himself coldly. You see, Chronostasis, I might not have been active for long, but I have made a few friends here and there that see value in me. Izuku smiled at seeing the man retract his quirk back into his hood. Very well then, I'll leave, but expect a visit from Kai Chisaki soon. He turned around to leave without starting a fight with the armed gang poised to attack him, but gave one last ominous heads up. And just a fair warning, Apotheosis, he's anything but merciful to people that disrespect him. When he was gone and the chain gang lowered their weapons, Izuku nearly doubled over. Oh wow. I almost threw up there. He panted, wiping the sweat from his brow. Thank you for the save, Shackle Bolt. No problem, kid. You may not be part of the gang, but we consider you a valuable ally, the villain said. It was a month later that Apotheosis went and joined up with the League of Villains. They had given him the workspace he needed for his project. Luckily, he never encountered the leader of the Shi Hasaikai. Present time, Stain should be in position by now, Izuku thought while he sat in his car. He'd been having his shadows keep an eye on the Shi Hasaikai ever since the hero killer's report. With a little blood and some forceful coercion, Stain and his partner Himiko were successful in tracking down the source of the quirk-erasing bullets. Izuku was surprised that it was a Yakuza group. These guys were practically extinct, but the name Shi Hasaikai did ring a familiar bell in his head. He remembered a time that seemed so long ago, before the League of Villains and before he created the Infinity Gauntlet. The memory of being threatened by a lackey from this particular group brought a scowl to his face. He said he worked for a man named Kai Chisaki. Running that name through his database was interesting. An orphan who was adopted by the former leader of the organization. Brought into the fold, rising to the rank of second in command and then boss when the previous head fell into a coma. The man's record was surprisingly clean, yet information beyond the most basic was lacking. Izuku was a genius, so detecting something off about the whole thing was child's play for him. So he had the shadow of his night's work behind the scenes to compile more info. With a lot of digging, it became clear that this man Chisaki was attempting to bring the Yakuza back to the top of the criminal underworld like it was in the old days before the advent of heroes. Chronostasis said something similar to that when they met back then. Izuku couldn't have this happening on his watch, with All for One out of the picture, the League in his back pocket and no notable or concerning villains in the limelight. The world of villainy was pretty much in his palm. Nothing could possibly threaten what he created. This new fair and balanced hero society would be his legacy, but this upstart Chisaki and his quirk-erasing bullets could ruin all that. The curious and scientific part of him, of course, wanted to find out how he accomplished this, but the rational and ruthless part of him knew he had to be eliminated as soon as possible and his research destroyed so no one picked up where Chisaki left off. Weeds needed to be pruned before they infest the garden, after all. That moment was now. Izuku ordered Stain to keep an eye on the compound, waiting for the moment that Kai Chisaki left. 2 hours ago he received the call that he did. The man had left the compound and alone at that. Stain was in pursuit. Normally such an assassination would be easy, but they were doing this in broad daylight, so a bit of patience and finesse was needed. Izuku decided to come to the area where it would happen to make sure Chisaki's silent execution would go off without a hitch. Plus he had to provide Stain with a quick escape. If the hero killer was captured, that would be another problematic headache for Izuku to deal with. He's crossing through the alley, 2 blocks away from your location. Stain reported into his communicator, awaiting your orders. Off with his Hida guillotine. Izuku smirked and got out of his car, making his way to the alley where the mission would soon be completed. Using the "notice me not" quirk he acquired through the Soul Stone, he slipped by random pedestrians like a ghost. When he arrived at the street where the alley ended, he deactivated the quirk, seeing that no one was around. Unfortunately, this proved to be a mistake. Hey! Izuku froze in surprise at being spotted almost immediately after turning that innocuous quirk off. He turned around to see a boy a bit taller and older than him. What stood out to him first and foremost was his cheerfully positive demeanor and the number 1,000,000 printed on the front of his costume. He didn't look like any hero that he knew. "Can I help you?" Izuku fake smiled. "I don't have time for this." Internally he was worried. He couldn't have any witnesses. "Your director Midoriya, right?" the blonde boy asked. "Oh my. I wonder what gave that away." Izuku mocked as he waved his left gauntlet-covered arm. Normally he would feign politeness, but this young hero was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He needed to go before this assassination took place. Hopefully Stain was hearing this conversation and would hold off until he got him out of here. "Yeah, sorry about that. Everyone knows who you are." The blonde hero just chuckled. "My name is Lemillion." "Good for you. Izuku talked as if he was speaking to a puppy. Is there something you need from me? I just wanted to meet the legend himself. Mirio wasn't put off by his tone or dismissive attitude. Now that he finally met Midoriya in person, he realized that he wasn't as intimidating as others made him out to be. While obviously powerful, he looked just any other teenager. I'm not a legend. I'm just a quirkless person trying to make a difference in the world. Izuku turned to stare at him harshly. Don't put me on some pedestal, please. I get it. The young hero apologized. Legends are hardly ever what they appear to be anyway. That's right. Izuku finally took a good look at this person. You look familiar. Have we met before? I doubt that, but I'm a third-year student at UA. You might have seen me during the sports festival. Mirio supplied proudly. Oh, now I remember, you were the one that got completely naked and they had to cut to commercial. Izuku actually laughed a real honest laugh right then and there, taking the wind out of the other boy's sails. That was really funny. That was an accident. Mirio tried to argue. Well, if your plan was to make a lot of people laugh, I think you accomplished that. The Gauntlet user chuckled. Still though, this guy needed to leave. Time was not on his side and they were standing right at the mouth of this dark alley where Kai Chisaki was supposed to meet his end at Guillotine's blade any moment now. So what brings you to this part of the city, Director Midoriya? Mirio asked, changing the subject. Simply taking a stroll. Watching the heroes and my robots keeping the peace. Izuku lied. Sometimes I like to remind myself that what I do is worth it. Is it worth it? Mirio questioned. Was all the lying, stealing and destruction worth it? That was what he really wanted to ask, but couldn't. Of course. Izuku smiled at him. Well, I'm sure you're busy, wouldn't want to keep you held up from saving someone. He needed to leave now or the mission would have to be aborted. We have a problem, kid. Stain whispered into his communicator. Izuku frowned at his words and dire tone. Before the hero killer could explain himself, the problem, as he called it, bolted out of the alley and crashed right into Izuku Midoriya's legs. Quickly catching the small figure from falling, Izuku took a look at her. A small pale little girl with messy off-white hair, big bright red eyes and a small horn sticking out of her forehead. But what immediately caught his eye and the hero next to him were the bandages covering both her arms and legs. Whoa there. Izuku knelt down to make sure she was all right. Hello. The girl looked up at him with wide frightened eyes. Is something the matter? There you are, Eri. A voice said from alley that the child just emerged from. Mirio and Izuku looked up to see a tall, dark-haired man in a forest green jacket and oddly enough a beak-shaped mask over his mouth. Midoriya immediately recognized him as the target that Stain was supposed to eliminate. It seems he pulled back because of the girl. Smart move on the hero killer's part, since he knew Izuku didn't like it when children were involved. I'm sorry for any trouble she may have caused you. It's no trouble at all, Izuku said politely. And you are? I'm her father, he said emotionlessly. Izuku doubted that. There was no information in the database that said Chisaki was married or had a child. Aren't you part of the Shi Hasaikai? Mirio suddenly blurted out. Midoriya leveled a glare at him for his bold statement. You guys are pretty famous. You could say that. Chisaki said. If you don't mind, we'll be on our way. Come along, Eri. He spoke in a tone that threatened the child not to make him tell her twice. Please. Eri quietly whispered, just loud enough for Izuku to hear. Please help me. Green eyes narrowed at Chisaki. May I ask why young Eri's arms and legs are covered in bandages? Izuku questioned out loud. Not that it's any of your concern, but Eri is a very clumsy girl, she falls down a lot. The plague-masked man claimed. Really now? Izuku gave him a skeptical smile. I remember falling down a lot when I was her age. Yet it was never anything a little ointment and a few band-aids couldn't fix. Mirio watched. Something was happening here. He could tell by the tension in the air building up every second these two looked at each other. Are you implying something, Director Midoriya? Chisaki leveled a glare at him. Oh, so you know who I am, but I'm afraid I don't know who you are. That was lie, but Izuku didn't want the Yakuza leader to get wise that he was on to him. He placed a protective arm around Eri's back. Kai Chisaki. He introduced himself. And you are? He turned to look at the hero boy that also found himself entangled in all this. Lemillion. Mirio followed his own example of polite introductions. Nice to meet you, Chisaki. Izuku dropped his smile. Now if you don't mind, why don't explain to me what you're doing to this little girl? And just like that all pleasantries were gone. I'm not sure what you're insinuating. Shisaki narrowed his gaze at him. As I said, Eri is a clumsy girl. She gets herself into accidents. Each word spoken had a razor-sharp edge to them. Izuku wasn't afraid of him though. He stood before scarier villains than him. Is that why she's practically sobbing into my suit and hasn't even once turned around to look at you? Izuku pierced him an equally threatening stare. Let's all calm down. Mirio tried to placate both parties. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. He placed a hand on Midoriya's shoulder before someone did something irrational. Even he could tell that there was something not right with the way Chisaki spoke about his daughter and the terrified state she was in. Take your hand off me, Lemillion. Izuku snapped at him calmly before turning back to the real threat. I'll have you know, Chisaki, that under the law any hero or government official level 5 and higher has full authority to take protective custody of a child suspected of being abused. Is that so? That Issa, if you have any proof of such accusations. Chisaki replied back. Which you don't. He took a dangerous step closer to them. You're right, I don't. Izuku could feel Eri gripping his jacket tighter when he said that. However, as a level 6 official I can legally take her to a doctor without your consent. If she shows signs of abuse, then she won't be going back with you. I see. The masked man sighed as he reached to remove his glove. He paused when the boy spoke up again. Luckily for us, I know a doctor who can see us immediately. Izuku smirked at him as he opened up a portal directly behind him. We can take care of this right now. Reaching down, he scooped Eri up in his arms and stepped back into the hole in space. Are you coming? You are her father, after all. He said that word father with obvious sarcasm. You should come to Lemillion, you are an eyewitness after all. Damn it. I underestimated his intelligence and quick thinking. Chisaki scowled under his mask. All that careful planning and work to make sure Midoriya and the HRD would never even notice him and his organization was now down the drain. He was told by Shigaraki himself not underestimate the strategist, as he called him, but he was still outsmarted by the brat. He was bringing Eri and himself to an unknown location, most likely surrounded by more witnesses, completely boxing him in. With no choice but to go along with this farce, Chisaki followed them through the portal to what appeared to be a very public healthcare center. Excuse me. Izuku spoke to the woman at the front desk while still holding the girl. I'm here to see Dr. Higurashi. Tell her I'm here and have a patient she needs to look at immediately. What are you doing? Mirio leaned over and whispered to him discreetly. There was more going on here. Just go along with whatever happens. Everything will be fine. Izuku whispered back while they waited for the doctor to show up. It didn't take long. Dr. Higurashi came rushing in. Knowing that Midoriya showing up unannounced must mean that she needed him for something important. Director Midoriya. Is there something you need? Curiously enough, he was carrying a young girl wrapped in bandages. She didn't pay any heed to the young hero standing next to him or the bird-masked man that was busy looking around the lobby in disgust. Lemillion, Chisaki, this is Dr. Higurashi, a pediatrician in charge of this health care center for children. He introduced her to them before explaining his reason for being her. Doctor, this young lady here needs a checkup. We have reason to believe that her father behind me here has been less than kind to her. Izuku gestured to the child in his arms. We need you to clear this up for us. Do you have time to do that right now? Well, the kids are busy with recess, right, but we can extend that for a few more hours. She smiled while adjusting her glasses. I'm sure they'd love that. Okay, Eri, this nice woman here is going to take care of you. Instead of calming down, Eri just clung tighter to him. That reaction worried him to a large degree. Since she didn't seem to be letting go anytime soon, Izuku decided to take her into the hospital wing himself. Okay, it looks like I'm coming with you. The three males followed the doctor through the hallways until they entered a basic medical clinic. Chisaki hadn't said a word, not a single protest from him. Midoriya didn't know what to make of that. One thing that did please him was that the leader of the Shi Hasaikai looked very uncomfortable to be in a medical center. I'm going to have to put you down now, Eri. She seemed reluctant, but eventually let go, so he could place her on the cushioned table. I'll be right outside, call if you need anything. He smiled warmly at her. Stepping out into the hall, He closed the door behind him to let Dr. Higurashi and Eri have some privacy for her medical examination while he joined his two tag-alongs. So what's going to happen now? Chisaki almost growled out. I'd like to know that as well. Mirio also turned to face Midoriya, wondering what the former villain was up to. He didn't like that a child was involved in all this, but thank goodness that Izuku had a heart and wanted to do what he could to take Eri away from her potential abuser. Turns out there was some light in him after all. Dr. Higurashi will look her over for signs of physical harm. If she shows signs of abuse, then I'll be contacting the police and keep Eri here until everything is sorted out. Izuku explained. Chisaki, you'll be questioned. Depending on your answers, you might be arrested at worst. At best, you'd be asked to leave to await further investigation. And what if you're wrong? Chisaki gave him a nasty look that wanted nothing more than to see him dead. Then Eri will be released back to you and I'll give a formal and personal apology for the inconvenience. Though the Gauntlet user doubted that would happen. After nearly 40 minutes of awkward silence. Well, mostly silent as Mirio kept attempting to make pleasant conversation and failed. Dr. Higurashi finally came out holding a clipboard. Well, other than feeling a bit hungry, Eri is quite healthy. No broken bones or injuries. Izuku frowned at that diagnosis. There had to be more than that. What about the bandages on her arms and legs? Mirio beat him to the question. I had a look at that. She has some extensive scarring. The doctor began. It seems too random for it to be done on purpose. I've seen some quirk-related accidents like that before. Getting an evil idea, Chisaki decided to finally speak up. It's because of her quirk. They all turned to face him. Her quirk causes her to frequently fall and get hurt. I've been getting her help, but it's slow going. Clever. Izuku thought. And what is her quirk, if you don't mind me asking? She can levitate her body. This often happens at random, sometimes while she sleeps. Chisaki said while thinking quickly. I'm not too keen on tying her down to her bed at night, so we simply tuck her into the blankets tightly. Oh, he's a great liar. Izuku was honestly impressed by the man's silver tongue. If that's the case, then it would explain her scars. The doctor looked at her clipboard again. She's perfectly healthy and I don't see any signs of abuse. Well, there goes the plan to get Eri away from him the easy way. Can I have a word with her? Izuku spoke up and without waiting for an answer opened the door to office and stepped inside. Eri looked up from the floor when the door opened to see the person who carried her here, but behind him she could see Chisaki in the hall glaring at her with murderous intent. Closing the door behind him, Izuku walked up to her. Hello, Eri. I don't think I introduced myself. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I'm the head of a government division called the Hero Regulation Department. The child looked down at the floor again nervously. Am ye in trouble? She asked while looking anywhere but at him. Izuku just smiled warmly at her. You're not in any trouble, I can assure you. He walked closer to her, knelt down so they were at eye level. But I would like for you to tell me the truth. With his right hand he gently tilted her head up. Is that man Kai Chisaki your father? Eri looked like she wanted to deny it, but then hesitated. Why yes. She wanted to say no, she really did, but that look that Chisaki gave her was haunting her thoughts. Eri didn't want anyone else to be destroyed because of her. Especially these nice people. Is he hurting you? Izuku asked, locking eyes with hers. No, Eri didn't stutter this time when she lied to him. The green-haired teen sighed in mild frustration. I want to help you, Eri, but I can't do that unless you're completely honest with me. She wouldn't meet his eyes anymore. Just say the words and I promise I'll get you away from him. Not another word came from her mouth. After a long quiet pause, Izuku finally relented. Alright, then I'm afraid you'll have to go back with him. That seemed to spark fear into Eri's face, yet she still didn't make a protest. Picking her up again, he gently placed on her bare feet. Walking to the door, Izuku opened it, leading Eri out into the hall. Well, everything checks out. Izuku said out loud. You have my sincerest apologies, Kai Chisaki. He bowed respectfully. Please allow me to return you and your daughter to your home. That won't be necessary. I made a call to my driver to come pick us up. The bird-masked man said almost distastefully. It should be here any second. Chisaki didn't want Midoriya to know the location of their compound. Unfortunately for him, Izuku already did. Then allow me at least to walk you out of the building. Izuku kept of his polite demeanor, but inside he was seething. defeated by the lies of a man and the silence of a child. A first-time experience for him. He didn't want to let this child back into this man's grip, but legally his hands were tied. Chisaki was using an obvious lie to explain her scars, and Eri was too afraid to speak the truth for some reason. "Are you coming to Lemillion?" "Yeah." Mirio went with him, keeping a close eye on Midoriya and the girl that walked between him and Chisaki. Without another word on the matter, the group made it to the lobby, where a car was clearly seen waiting outside the main entrance. After apologizing again for the inconvenience, Izuku watched them get into the car with a seemingly neutral face. Chisaki bid them a good day, while at the same time giving Midoriya a smug, victorious look that he thought was hidden due to his mask, but the green-haired teen could tell by his eyes. He didn't even help his daughter get into the car. Both Mirio and Izuku noted. "Lemillion." The gauntlet wearer spoke as he watched the car leave. "Why do you want to become a hero? What's your goal? Your dream?" He needed a minor distraction from the simmering rage that was permeating him right now. "I want to save 1,000,000 people." Tagada told him the truth. All with a smile that will bring smiles and happiness to others. "So that's the reason for your hero name and that number on your chest." Izuku finally turned to face him, as if noticing him for the first time. "It's a promise, no vow is more like it." "Yes. Exactly," the blonde boy nodded proudly. There was more he wanted to say to Midoriya, but now was not the time to draw that kind of attention to himself. "Reminds me of All Might a bit." Izuku smirked at the memory of his defeated enemy. Enemy was a loose term there when he didn't really consider that shriveled skeleton of a man as a proper adversary. Unlike him, you might actually live up to your promises. We can only hope. He chuckled lightly. "Which hero office do you work for?" Izuku pointed his gauntlet at the open air next to him as the blue space stone glowed to life. "Sir Night Eye, but I'm sure I can find my way back from here." He politely refused the offer of transportation. "Please, I insist. It's the least I can do for dragging you into this situation." The younger teen generated a portal that would lead directly outside the hero's office. As the director of the HRD, he knew where all these agencies were located. "Thank you." Mirio thanked him and stepped through the portal. He looked back to say one last thing, but the gateway slammed shut behind as soon as he arrived. Oh well. He'd make sure to have a proper conversation with him the next time they met. Todoroki took a break from training under Uraraka. While Iida was busy on the other side of the training room testing out his new armored shin plates with a few practice kicks, they were working on how to combine their oddities and abilities. There was a rolling thunderclap that reverberated throughout the base every few minutes. When the cacophonous din became too much for them to concentrate on, they all stopped. Shoto inquired, "Is he still out there?" as she heard another thunderclap even farther away. For the previous few hours, this had continued. Another clap echoed from outside, and Uraraka sighed, "Yeah. What happened?" Iida was curious to hear the whole tale. What could have enraged Midoriya to the point where he felt compelled to vent his fury on the sky? She said, "I'll talk to him." Uraraka exited the training room and went to the elevator, where she pressed the helipad button. When the elevator reached its destination, the doors opened, and she flinched as she saw a blinding flash and then another thunderclap. Izuku was standing at the opposite end of the helipads. He was wearing just the gray slacks and black button-down shirt. He had taken off his jacket and tie. With the quirk of the Weather Dominator, he waved his right hand to control the very clouds, covering it in sparks of black and purple. She also noticed that the gauntlet was glowing a bright green color. Izuku kept the details of his creation very close to the vest, but he did divulge that the Power Stone had the ability to significantly increase the peculiarities he had acquired with the Soul Stone in addition to amplifying the effects of the other stones. He brought his arm down, and a rolling, thunderous echo could be heard miles away as a bolt of lightning struck the water. Everybody manages their anger in a unique way. Uncontrollably, some people let it all out. Some people hold it in until it blows up. Izuku was the kind to direct it toward hands-on instruction. It was therapeutic for him, somehow, to work out his aggression and frustration in a spar or while practicing with his gauntlet. Ochako wasn't sure if that was healthy or not, but who was she to judge as she wasn't a psychologist? Izuku shot one final lightning strike into the sea before pausing for a rest. He heard and saw someone coming up behind him. Naturally, Uraraka. She was the knight with the most empathy, and she would be the first to notice if he was upset about something. She was not yet acknowledged by Midoriya. Rather, his thoughts turned to the discussion he had a few days prior with the excellent physician and the cause of his extreme frustration. Retrograde Dr. Higurashi inquired, "What was this about? You know you can't go around accusing people of abusing their children without more evidence than a hunch." Izuku informed her that he didn't know that. After sending Lemillion back to his agency, he accompanied the physician to her office for a private discussion. Beside that girl was without a doubt being abused. I could tell. Higurashi countered, she didn't have any bruises that would show otherwise. She could concur with him, nevertheless, that Aries' physical and mental conditions weren't right. The scars on her arms and legs looked too erratic to be on purpose, but that could be what he wanted anyone that looked closely at her to think. Plus Chisaki claimed that it was accidental due to her quirk. She had received training as a child psychologist in addition to her pediatrician credentials. "Well then, doctor, what is your psychological diagnosis?" she asked. She paused and sighed. "In my professional opinion, Eri was terrified of Chisaki, but what concerns me is that she wasn't crying or showing that many signs of distress that a child who is in her position should show." "Which means," Izuku said, realizing her intended meaning. The doctor appeared extremely troubled by the conclusions that they both reached, saying that whatever that man is doing to her, she's gotten more or less used to it by now. She'd worked with abused kids a lot in the past. That was the purpose of the health center, to adopt eccentric kids abandoned to endure abuse at the hands of their former, immoral society. She was aware of the telltale signs. The defensive stance and inability to look an adult in the eyes. Not to mention that for some strange reason she was unable to ask for assistance. "Did you get a DNA sample? Perhaps I can find out more about her if I analyze it," Izuku supplied. "If Chisaki lied about Aries' quirk, then we can use that to get her away from him." Dr. Higurashi's quirk was named Numb. When I asked and approached her with a syringe, she started to panic, so I had to use my quirk. Depending on where she touched, she could numb parts of the human body and remove pain. She didn't feel or notice anything. She handed Izuku a tiny vial that contained Aries' blood after reaching into the front pocket of her lab coat. Finish the flashback without turning around. Izuku acknowledged her using her codename. "You look like you want to say something, Angel." Ochako was curious and asked, "How did you know it was me?" as she walked up. He said, forcing her to look down, "Look at the floor." What she saw was a live human eye the normal size blended into the platform they were standing on. He said, canceling the quirk and making the eye disappear, "Eye stamp. A very useful quirk, makes it hard to sneak up on me." Ochako said, "That's creepy." Then she inquired as to why she had come here. Uraraka was startled to see the dark circles beneath his eyes as he turned to face her properly. "Are you alright? Because you've been out here hurling lightning bolts for a while. You don't look so good." He muttered, "Been having trouble sleeping lately. Weird dreams of people I don't recognize. Probably the stress of the job getting to me." She genuinely asked, "Have you thought about taking some time off?" Rather than respond to her query, Izuku asked, "Do I seem like a good person? Do I come off as someone warm or welcoming?" Uraraka gave him the straight talk, saying, "Well, you're nice most of the time, but you're certainly intimidating when you want to be. Why? Did someone say otherwise?" Observing her shake her head, he asked, "Do you know what the whole point of creating this Infinity Gauntlet was?" I said, "The true power of my invention is the power to accomplish anything." He turned to face the horizon and held his armored hand up, reaching out to grab something that wasn't there. "The point was not just to create a device that granted me the power of quirks, the strongest quirks, but also it was supposed to make dreams into reality. And yet even with all the power that my gauntlet grants me, I still couldn't make a little girl tell me the truth." Izuku sighed dejectedly. He muttered something about legal and political nonsense getting in the way and said, "I could have saved her right then and there, but I didn't." She knew the general outline of what had happened the other day, so she said, "You shouldn't let that get you down." How he encountered a young girl who was obviously attempting to get away from her abuser. That Izuku had to return the girl to the man's care and that the man had managed to talk his way out of the charges. Izuku corrected her, saying, "I'm not upset. I'm frustrated. Fortuitously, I don't subscribe to the notion of failure." He pivoted and made his way to the elevator. "If something doesn't work, I try again and again, using every mistake to create an eventual victory." The girl with brown hair said, "That's a very ambitious way of thinking," as she trailed behind him. So what's the plan then? Izuku gave a straightforward explanation. Get information, gather proof, and then destroy this Hasaikai in one fell swoop. I need you, Shoto and Tenya to be ready. I get the feeling that we'll be making a move soon. I had a talk earlier this morning with the Prime Minister about initiating the Deus Ex Machina protocol. Ochako's eyebrows raised in surprise. If that protocol was about to take effect, then things were going to get serious. In addition, I don't want to cause you further anxiety, but Ochako turned her head away from him. Let me guess. Mei Hatsume blew up her lab again. He exhaled deeply in frustration. Let me guess. Izuku closed his eyes and massaged his temples, then said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it right now. Her labs have been reinforced, she has first aid kits, and the robots bring her food. Elsewhere, Prime Minister Toriyama greeted his two guests, saying, thank you for coming. On the other side of the minister's desk stood the dog-headed chief of police, Kenji Suragame, and the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission. He would have had the Commissioner General, but Suragame was next in line for the position, and that cynical man was being investigated for concealing heroic behavior. He had given them a call because he didn't want their phone conversation to be accidentally recorded. He started the meeting by turning on his bug jammer. Director Midoriya called me earlier about the Quirk erasing bullets case that he and his department are investigating. Dog-headed chief said, such an investigation wasn't necessary. Several detectives in the Night Eye Agency are already on top of it. The minister grinned wryly and said, and yet Midoriya has done so much more in the short time that he has been investigating. I guess that goes to show you what a genius can accomplish with government-backed resources at his disposal. With all seriousness, President Takahashi asked, why did you call us here? Toriyama decided to take things seriously too and sighed. The head of the commission froze, wide-eyed. Midoriya asked to enact the Deus Ex Machina protocol. She asked, seriously? The chief of police gave them a questioning glance. You're going to let him do that? The dogman asked, what's this Deus Ex Machina protocol? The prime minister clarified, it's part of the agreement we made with Midoriya. I gave him the authority over the heroes that he wanted. In return, he leaves fighting villains to the heroes. The power of his gauntlet is reserved for emergency purposes only. Why wasn't it violating their agreement that he fight All Might on live television? The chief of police wanted to know that. All Might was a hero that was illegally attacking him in public. Midoriya was well within his rights to defend himself and deal with the former hero. Toriyama explained. Midoriya is only allowed to investigate villains, coordinate arrests and direct heroes, but he's not allowed to actively participate in the field. The commission president continued, unless that specific protocol is initiated and the restrictions placed upon him are lifted. You can't allow him to do this. You'll just be giving him more of what he wants. He already has everything he wants. Temporarily lifting his restrictions to take out this Yakuza group is just an easy solution to a future problem. Toriyama explained his reasoning. These quirk erasing bullets pose a very serious threat to our society. The commission president countered, then let the heroes take care of it. This is not what she wanted to happen, she said. Sir Night Eye and his allies are already on the case. The more issues heroes resolve, the more society comes to believe in them. Which is a step toward persuading the Senate and the Prime Minister to remove Midoriya from office. Of course, letting him use his gauntlet on the field would ensure victory, but the public would only give him the credit. As I've already said, Midoriya takes care of things quickly and more efficiently than the hero agencies, Toriyama reinforced. Is he taking over the investigation entirely, or will he just be supporting him? Inquired the police chief. The Prime Minister replied, he'll be back up. The heroes are about to conduct a raid from the reports I've read. Hopefully I can get the Deus Ex Machina protocol initiated in time for Midoriya to be ready. The Senate needs to be notified first. With a disappointed expression on her elderly face, Takahashi said, I can't believe you're going through with this. The question was imprecise, but the head of the commission knew what he was talking about before this whole thing began. What was I supposed to do? She brashly said, you should have had more faith in All Might and the other heroes. You should have helped to restore society's belief and hope in him. Instead you bowed down to that beast like a coward. The Prime Minister angrily said, you don't seem to understand the type of beast that Izuku Midoriya really is. His brilliant and tenacious mind allows him to find workarounds to any problem he faces. That, coupled with his gauntlet that gives overwhelming power, makes him pretty much unstoppable. He already explained to us how my refusal to his demands would merely slow him down. Remember? I took the path that would cause the least amount of destruction to our great country. Protecting as many lives as possible. Isn't that what heroes do? The President Takahashi spit out, "You're no hero." Yes, I'm not a hero. I'm a politician that was elected to govern the country to the best of my ability. Toriyama sighed. Speaking of heroes though, I need you to do something for me, Takahashi. Tell your errand boy Hawks to stop what he's doing. The commission president lied, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." The minister gave her another scowl. "Oh please. Did you really think I didn't know about you sending him to find a weak link in Midoriya's department?" he asked. "Tell him to back off. If Izuku Midoriya catches wind of what you and Hawks are up to, I can't tell you how severe the consequences will be." The dog-headed police chief Suragame said, "I don't want to sound like a suck-up or speak out of turn, but I think you made the right choice, Prime Minister Toriyama." The men at the stations were immensely appreciative of the robotic enforcers, saying, "I've seen the results of Midoriya's changes firsthand. He's aggressive and vicious, but his methods do get results." After being reduced to cannon fodder in the battles between heroes and villains, the Titans were making it safer to be a police officer in these times. The public was calling for heroes to behave more like heroes and less like celebrities, and schools were changing their standards. Takahashi inquired, "And what will happen when his power finally goes to his head?" Toriyama looked at her coldly and said, "You say that like it's a sure thing. Look, I didn't call you two here for your counsel or opinions. I'm simply telling you what will happen, so you can stay in the loop and not come whining to me when Midoriya shows up to the battlefield with his loyal knights." With that, he dismissed them from his office. "I sincerely hope that this is the right choice for me," he thought to himself, wondering what lay ahead. Izuku Midoriya was, at the absolute least, a logical individual who made decisions without considering his feelings. At least he can rely on him to be that much. Returning to HQ, Izuku felt like screaming. He wanted to scream and use his gauntlet to destroy something, but that would turn him into Bakugo's equal. Izuku, however, was filled with an unfathomable level of rage as he looked at the computer screen. He was angry because it was staring back at him. It was what Eri learned from the insufficient analysis of his DNA. He set up his own lab in the base, which was off limits to his team. Here, he had refurbished the majority of the gear he had used while employed by Geonosis Tech and the League of Villains. Take the genetic decoder and analyzer, for instance. He simply assembled technology that had previously been created by other brilliant minds. The machine was not his invention. His research on quirks and the creation of the Infinity Stones benefited greatly from it. Stones he no longer had to make, but he was unwilling to part with a tool this helpful. Days ago, Izuku used that genetic analyzer to decipher the DNA he discovered in the bullets with a quirk of erasing them. Unfortunately, it was impossible to identify the quirk genes in that sample because it was so contaminated with chemicals. The device examined and analyzed each individual's unique DNA traits by comparing them to those of other people using a collective database. He had nothing to compare it to at that point, up until the decent doctor took a sample of Eri's blood and sent it off for study. Eri's quirk genes were something he had never seen before, so it took him a few days to figure out what it was. However, it was crucial to note that it matched the DNA in the bullets, proving that it wasn't a levitation quirk as Chisaki had claimed. Izuku was enraged to learn that she was right there in front of me. The young girl was the source of the bullets. I let her go even though she was within reach. In addition to being furious with himself, he was also repulsed by the Shi Hasaikai, particularly at this Kai Chisaki. With fierce energy, he took out his phone and dialed the captain of his Black Hand. He gave the order, "Guillotine, have Dragon brought to me." Stain countered, "He's busy hunting down the last of the drug dealers." Through gritted teeth, Izuku uttered, "This is important. He can hunt them any other time." Himiko had been serving as his go-between with the League of Villains. "I have a new assignment for Dragon. Also tell Chameleon to report back to me as well. I need to know what Tamura is going to do next." He was aware that Chisaki had met with them, and that the meeting had taken a violent turn, resulting in Magna, the villain, being killed. A true pity. Izuku found his quirk amusing and practical, so he kind of liked him. "Shigaraki, Kurogiri, Twice, Compress, Spinner, and a few extra prototype Nomu were left in the league, but they couldn't defeat even a recently created professional hero. Himiko Toga continued to see herself as a member of their group, which is why Izuku regularly took advantage of her fixation on him in order to obtain information from her. That's how he discovered Tamura Shigaraki's plans. When the chance arose, pretend to team up with the Yakuza group and then stab them in the back. Naturally, Izuku would permit him to carry on with it. In order to accomplish his goals, Shigaraki had to grow into a formidable but manageable threat to society. The league commander getting his hands on the bullets or the kid was one thing he could not permit. Izuku folded his hands together and started to plan how he was going to save Eri and get his hands on that bastard Shisaki. I need to make sure all my pieces are in place before I pull this off. The issue was going to be the heroes who would surely be involved in this operation. This case was already under the purview of Sir Nightai, the one-time All Might sidekick. One of the people he has on his suspect list is someone who either knows where the former peace symbol is located or may be hiding him. He was unable to completely rule out the possibility that the two are still in contact, even though his research indicated that they haven't spoken in years. He had to get back to work, but for now he'd have to investigate that later. According to the reports, the Nightai agency intended to raid the Shi Hasaikai's main operational base in the coming days in order to apprehend the group. Izuku questioned why they were acting in this way given the paucity of information regarding the group's operations and the peculiarities of its members. The wearer of the gauntlet thought Nightai might have reached the same conclusion regarding the bullet erasing quirk. Lemillion, the older boy, was with him when he encountered Shisaki and his purported daughter. He was also an intern for Sir Nightai. He probably told the hero everything, and the expert had to form an opinion based on both fresh and old data. Izuku started tapping the desk with his fingers. The Prime Minister's final approval was all that was required. He could get over this with just one phone call. Izuku gazed into the chasm that he had unexpectedly discovered himself in. This was not his usual dream these days. Compared to normal dreams, he felt more coherent this time. As though he knew himself and his surroundings better. He saw the same 8 people standing in the shadows when he turned around. Even though he usually had a good eye for faces, he occasionally got a quick glance at them and still failed to recognize these people. The person in the middle moved in his direction. Since no one else ever spoke to him, this one appeared to be the leader. Izuku's gaze trailed the man's ascent. His white, unkempt hair seemed to cast shadows over the upper portion of his face, but Izuku could still clearly see his mouth moving. Midoriya tried to read his lips, but no words reached him. All he could make out was the word, "Enough. Enough," exclaimed Izuku. He tried to ask, "What do you mean? What are you saying? What's enough?" but received no answer. The dream ended with the figures disappearing into darkness before he could ask for more information. Izuku startled awake. As he sat upright in bed, he eventually became aware of the beeping sound emanating from his nightstand. He grinned as he took hold of the tablet and saw what he had been waiting for. Finally, the Prime Minister himself sent him the signed and approved documents. The Deus Ex Machina protocol appears to have been approved. Full authorization to defeat the Shi Hasaikai using his powers and knights. At last. Tapping a button on his tablet, he let out the alarm across his building. Iida, Uraraka, and Todoroki all knew the routine. Get up, change into your uniforms, gather your belongings, and head to the helipad. Izuku leapt from his bed and went to his bathroom to get ready and splash some water in his face. The safest room in the base was his bedroom. The best security technology, including bio and quirk scanners, had the entire room sealed and covered. The only means of entry and exit was a heavily vaulted blast door that would be difficult for even All Might to pry open. After all, a sleeping Midoriya was a vulnerable Midoriya. He needed all that extra protection if he was going to be able to sleep soundly without having to worry about some enemy coming in to kill him, or worse, take the gauntlet off his unconscious body. He studied his muscular shirtless torso in the mirror. He had been training extra hard lately, trying to get one for all under control. He was still unable to use all of it without endangering his health. Fortunately, he could repair that damage with the Time Stone. He did discover, however, that he could safely channel a small portion of that power throughout his whole body. All he had to do was gradually enhance that. Annoying, but in Midoriya's perspective, progress nonetheless. Turning his head away from the mirror, he looked at the gauntlet that was still on his left arm. His gaze moved slowly over each stone until it settled on the green power stone that was positioned in the outer palm. Seen from the outside, One for All was actually quite the oddity. One for All gained strength over an extended period of time by being passed down through 8 inheritors, whereas All for One could gain power quickly, contingent on the peculiarities that were taken, ultimately outperforming even All for One and eliminating its creator. In his opinion, One for All was a little bit of a letdown. Even though his super strength was amazing, he didn't want this quirk for that reason. Theoretically, the massive amount of stockpiled power ought to greatly magnify all the other stones. It worked for the most part, but for some strange reason, whenever he attempted to increase the strength of a quirk that had been taken with the Soul Stone, it was never nearly as strong as it should have been. Izuku found it difficult to believe that those two eccentricities were incompatible. It was almost like they were. He tossed those thoughts to the back of his mind and turned on the sink, splashing some water in his face. He had a young girl to save and a Yakuza group to destroy at the moment. Meanwhile, walking with his second in command, Shisaki sighed. I suppose it couldn't be avoided. They had Ares' room in mind. The battle above had just started, and now was the moment to withdraw while the adversaries were preoccupied. I had hoped we'd have more time, but it seems these heroes wanted to catch us off guard. Chronostasis said, we're a step ahead of them, so they didn't. Good thing our informant gave us the heads up. Reflecting on his first meeting with the head of HRD, Overhaul thought back, we're also lucky that the potentially biggest problem isn't involved. He also recalled his discussion with Shigaraki about him. Retrograde sitting opposite Tamura Shigaraki, Kaichisaki said, tell me about Midoriya. The league chief agreed to lend the Yakuza group twice and Himiko Toga after they had recently established a rather shaky alliance. However, the hand-covered villain drew the line when Shisaki requested Kurogiri, which, for the time being, was okay. Eventually, he would catch up with him. With a sour tone, Shigaraki asked, the strategist? What interest is he to you? Overhaul looked at him and said, he used to work for you, did he not? Chronostasis had sent Apotheosis to bring him in before the latter joined the league. All that time you didn't know he was building his gauntlet. Right under your nose. Sadly, the child declined, and the chain Ganga, a gang of small-time criminals, was providing protection. So Overhaul himself went to the garage to meet this brilliant consultant in person and perhaps impart some wisdom. After taking out the gang, he discovered that Apotheosis had been enlisted by yet another evil group and was currently unreachable. It wasn't until he saw the news footage of the child destroying a hero tech building and his identity being revealed that he became aware of the kid. The boy then used his impressive footwork to force his way into a government position. So what kind of person is he? Shigaraki snarled, he's a brat that doesn't know how good he had it with us. However, he is incredibly devious, calculating, and isn't afraid to go for the cheap shots to get what he wants. He pisses me off most of the time, but it was those very traits that made me want him in my league in the first place. Thinking back to his recent encounter with him, Shisaki thought, I see, so he's very dangerous then. Despite his strength, Midoriya was constrained by both legal and political constraints. Extremely dangerous, so I wouldn't go putting myself on his radar if I were you, Tamura warned him. It's a bit late for that, Shisaki bitterly thought. He was directly in Izuku Midoriya's line of sight as he chased after that mischievous girl Eri. The boy with the gauntlet, the one that could destroy entire cities and remove those disgusting changes people referred to as quirks. From now on, he would have to exercise caution in all of his future actions. Current moment. As his assistant gathered Eri from her room, Shisaki said to Chronostasis, it's time to go. They were able to plan an escape from the heroes and police who had just arrived to raid their base because of some insider knowledge. Overhaul intended to leave with the source of his bullets while the underlings kept them occupied. We have to move quickly, Chronostasis said. Those robots supporting them won't be able to keep those heroes at bay for long, he remarked as the corridor shook violently. Ahead of them, holes in the ceiling were ripped open, revealing what initially appeared to be massive drilling machines. The mechanical pieces shifted and reshaped into tall humanoid forms as they hit the floor. Shisaki grimaced at the 3 titans that were now in his path, spreading dirt all over the place, saying, should have known they built robots that could do this. Naturally, Midoriya, the mastermind behind everything, created a model for subterranean infiltration. A metal drone lunged forward, attempting to seize Overhaul. He took off his glove and allowed the robot to approach, saying, "How annoying." All it took was a single stroke. All that remained of the Titan was a heap of shattered wires, broken circuits, and metal fragments. "Is that it?" Chisaki asked, taunting Eri as she watched in horror as the next two machines charged at them only to be destroyed in the same moment as the first. "Stop right there," yelled a fresh voice. Chronostasis and Overhaul turned to see a young, blonde hero. Chisaki said, "I remember you." When Izuku Midoriya called him on his bluff about being Eri's father, he vaguely remembered someone else being there. "You were that hero boy that was with Midoriya." With his mind already on his next move, Mirio said, "It's Lemillion." Chisaki asked, "Should I care?" Without another word, Mirio took a stance, prepared to act to save Eri. "You'll be dead in a minute, so what does it matter?" Outside, Ryukyu, the dragon hero, commanded, "Push him back." She had changed to try and repel Riki Akatsukame, a member of the Yakuza. Even though it seemed like they had defeated him, he took a trigger shot and used the police and heroes as fuel to become even stronger. Despite his eccentricity, the Titan robots were the first to dogpile him. That was ineffective because he tore through the machinery, turning them into scrap metal, using his newly acquired strength. Gah! His powerful fist slammed the dragon woman away. His strength blasted back even Najire-chan. Rikia then turned her attention to her intern, Tsuyu, also known as Froppy. He was stopped from attacking the girl by a massive wall of ice. Tsuyu's gaze followed the trail of ice until it reached the source, then said, "That's just like Shoto Todoroki, a former classmate, suited up in his new weapons and armor." Reaching her, Shoto asked, his two matching swords in hand, "Are you all right?" One was engulfed in flames, while the other was spraying ice. The big, burly man kicked through the ice before the woman could ask, "Todoroki, what are you doing here?" which caused the frog girl to fly backward. Fortunately, she was caught off guard by another unexpected visit. She was lifted into the air and safely landed on the ground by Tenya Iida. In the meantime, Todoroki sent another ice glacier to obstruct Rikia's advance. Ribbit. Tsuyu watched as Uraraka flew over them on his mechanized wings, carrying her safely out of harm's way. Punching through the ice once more, the Yakuza thug yelled, "You're in my way." For some strange reason, Todoroki just produced more for him to destroy. The half-and-half boy continued his attack without saying anything. Ryukyu landed directly next to Iida, asking, "What are you three doing here?" She was aware of Director Midoriya's hero trainees, of course. Even though they had recently gained a lot of popularity, not much was known about them or the type of training they were carrying out at the Hero Regulation Department headquarters. Tenya Iida, aka Quicksilver, yelled very dramatically, "Not to worry. We are under orders to assist however we can." Tsuyu exclaimed, Iida, you can put me down now," realizing he was still holding her. Tenya disregarded her plea and took off with his engine quirk to take the UA student somewhere away from the fighting, saying, "It's all right. I'll take you to safety while my comrades take down this villain." Todoroki whispered into the communicator concealed beneath his scarf, "Are you in position?" With excitement, Uraraka exclaimed, "Ready to go." After they figured out how to combine their peculiarities, the two of them had been practicing this move for a while. "Where's Iida? He's going to miss this." As he continued to hurl more ice at his unaware opponent, Todoroki clarified, he said he was going to help evacuate the injured heroes and police from the area. "I saw him getting Asui out here." Dark Way with a suspicious gaze, Tsuyu asked, "What's going on here?" After bringing her to this dim alleyway, her former class president finally set her down. He turned off his communicator and removed his helmet, resembling a knight. "I'm sorry, but I had to get us away from the robots," he told her. Pulling a folded-up slip of paper out of the pouch on his utility belt, he said, "I don't want this conversation heard by anyone." She didn't have time to question what was on it or why he was giving her a note before he said, "I need you to get this to one of the teachers at UA." His tone was severe and unforgiving, leaving no opportunity for debate. "Don't say a word of this to anyone. Keep this letter in your pocket and don't take it out until you're at UA." Tsuyu croaked nervously but followed his instructions. "Okay." She glanced back up at him after tucking the note into her pocket. Iida put his helmet back on and commanded, This conversation never happened. Proceed as usual. Carry on as normal. He said, turning his communicator back on and leaving the alley. Returning to the high street through their comms, Uraraka told him, "All right, get back." The dragon hero wondered what they were planning as he watched in fascination. The young Todoroki has only used his ice-based quirk so far for attacking. However, it didn't seem to work. Katsukame just kept laughing insanely and tearing through it. Using his fire sword, the dual quirk user abruptly launched himself to a safe distance. She then became aware of the absence of the ice blocks that were supposed to be strewn all over the street. Todoroki and Ochako both called, "Ready." At that moment, Ryukyu discovered the location of all the ice. Frozen chunks hung around the girl with the metal angel wings, hovering just above the villain. "Mega Hail!" she exclaimed, releasing her grip on the objects suspended in gravity by putting her fingers together. As the ice chunks fell upon their intended target, her jet-powered wings kept her aloft. As Katsukame was repeatedly struck by the falling ice, he let out a loud cry, "Gah!" When it was over, the man was lying unconscious in the middle of the street, buried beneath a mound of icy debris. In her dragon form, Ryukyu returned to the ground behind Fahrenheit. She gave the young hero a compliment, saying, "That was impressive." "Thanks." Shoto maintained his aloof attitude toward people even though his perception of his quirk had changed. He didn't do it to be patronizing to other people. Rather, after having it for so long, it just came easily to him. Ochako, also known as Angel, watched the area carefully from a height above the street. It appears that the compound was taken over by the police and heroes. At this very moment, the Shi Hasaikai's underlings were being rounded up and taken into custody. Someone shouted right behind her, "That was so cool." Uraraka nearly lost her balance using her jet-powered wings due to the sudden shock. She turned and saw an older girl who appeared to have a similar quirk that allowed her to fly. Uraraka hesitantly said, "Oh. Hello," to the girl with blue eyes and hair. "I'm sorry I don't know you." She said, "You can call me Najire-chan." The yellow spiraling energy that seemed to emanate from her feet was noticed by Uraraka. It must be her peculiarity. Najire cut her off before she could say hello herself. She said rather bluntly, "You're that zero-gravity girl from the sports festival. The one that got expelled." "Yes, indeed, that is me." The winged girl gave a sorrowful nod. Najire said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound insulting." With a smile, Uraraka assured her that there were no hard feelings, saying, "It's all right. I'm over it now. We should probably head down there and help round up the rest of these thugs here on the surface while Izuku takes care of the leaders." "Izuku? Are she and him on first-name terms?" Najire jolted out of her reverie at what the former University of Alabama student had just said. She let out a loud cry. "Wait a second. Midoriya. Director Midoriya is here." Najire looked around in search of the boy with green hair. Uraraka pointed to the Yakuza compound and said, "He's already inside. This will be over soon." Within, as his opponent's crystal-clad arm slammed him against the wall, Tamaki let out a painful grunt. He found himself locked in a 3-on-1 battle with two villains who had peculiarities that could counter his, while the other was undoubtedly the trio's strongest member and could easily take him out. Yu Hojo laughed. "Looks like you're the one who needs saving now." Toya Setsuno's oddball larceny easily peeled away Tamaki's protective shell armor. Sorimitsu Tabe, the third person in this trio, quickly ate up any tentacles that he showed. As soon as Sanita realized he was in a tight spot, he tried to countermove, but something else occurred. Just above the bald crystal-wielding man's head, a small portal materialized, and a gold gauntlet streaked with green sparks reached down to seize the Yakuza member by the face. The man was taken aback when he felt his head being abruptly lifted and the portal constricting around his neck to keep him from escaping. Purple veins began to spread throughout his body, and his two partners watched in horror as their comrade's body began to thrash and spasm. Although they were unable to hear him scream, they could tell by his movements that he was in great pain. His peculiarities seemed to disappear as the crystals that had covered him withdrew back into his body. His body let go and his movements ceased, tumbling to the ground like a rag doll. A second portal appeared while they were preoccupied. It was located above the bagged, masked, carnivorous one. Overhead, a Titan robot crashed into him. The machine took hold of Sorimitsu's head and forcefully slammed his face against it, rendering him unconscious and pinning him to the ground. Without any delay, Tamaki took down the final Yakuza member by using his tentacles to whip him in his terrified face. Once every target had been eliminated, a new portal appeared. This time, however, it was Izuku Midoriya instead of a robot. He left with such casualness, as though he hadn't noticed that he was in the center of the Shi Hasaikai's base. "Are you all right, Sunyator?" Tamaki asked, noticing something strange in his eyes. The iris was white and the sclera was green, giving the appearance that the colors were reversed. He pointed to the blonde and said, "I'm sorry I couldn't step in earlier, but this one's quirk might have been problematic for me." "How did you?" Tamaki asked, feeling both relieved and perplexed. Izuku pointed at his sockets and said, "X-ray eyes. One of the quirks I appropriated lets me see through walls. I watched your fight from a few rooms away and waited for the right moment to intervene." The older boy asked, "Thanks for the help, but why are you here?" Izuku grinned and gave the young hero a medical pack, saying, "As you just said. I'm here to help and that's all you need to know." He stepped back into the portal that had formed behind him and said, "My apologies for leaving you here, but time is of the essence." Then he closed it. With caution, the older boy watched him go. Tamaki felt his broken ribs and hissed in agony. He considered the situation for a minute. Director Midoriya, the head of the Department of Hero Regulation, was now involved. Tamaki believed that he was not permitted to meddle in heroic endeavors. The upcoming stop. With another round of punches, Rappa pummeled Fat Gum, asking, "This all you have?" The hero, standing watchfully over an unconscious Kirishima, fell to one knee. The boy with the red hair made every effort to breach the defense that his partner had put up to keep Rappa safe. Fortunately, it was just enough to allow Fat Gum to successfully take out the member of the 8 bullets. Oddly enough, Kendo Rappa took no action to shield the other man. He expressed his gratitude that Tengai was no longer involved, saying that he could now enjoy the fight without interference from others. "Come on, get up. A real man dies on his feet," he taunted. Before the superhero could stand once more and resume the battle, a portal appeared beneath Rappa's feet. "What the?" He was smart enough to get out of the way before he drowned. A fresh voice said, "Nice reflexes." Fat Gum turned to face the figure that was emerging from the shadows after realizing what it was. He identified himself as the former criminal-turned-government official, Izuku Midoriya. "Who in the hell are you?" exclaimed Rappa. Izuku questioned, "Are you joking?" He turned to face the hero and asked again, "Is he joking?" "I'm Director Midoriya, head of the Hero Regulation Department." The burly villain answered bluntly, "Doesn't ring a bell. I defeated All Might a while ago." Izuku gave it another go, but this guy still didn't acknowledge him. Rappa said, "Don't watch the news. But this child must be really strong if he beat All Might." Izuku approached him calmly and stood between the now thin hero and the muscular thug, saying, "Well then allow me to educate you." Rappa didn't wait to give the child a punch before he could say anything more. The boy with hair simply caught the fist in his gauntlet, without even moving his feet an inch. Izuku smirked and pointed his bare hand and now covered in black sparks at the man, saying, "You're the attack first, ask questions later type 1C. Rappa was instantly propelled in the direction he pointed, Vector. Rappa leapt back up and charged him, saying, "Ha! Throwing me won't be enough." Izuku flash warped away from him, saying, "You know." He again twisted away from the swinging fists, saying, "You remind me a bit of a villain I fought some time ago." He kept warping to avoid the hits, much to the man's annoyance. "His quirk was very different from yours, but both your aggressive styles are very similar." "Fight me, damn it," yelled Rappa. Izuku merely laughed at what he said. The teenager leapt on his back and warped right behind him, saying, "You meatheads are all the same. Thinking with your fists and your quirks." Rappa attempted to dislodge Izuku, but he was super strong and could cling on for dear life. Using his gauntlet to grasp the back of his neck, he triggered the soul stone. "Gah!" The villain Fat Gum was fighting screamed in pain as he watched with wide eyes. He was thrashing around, and purple veins covered his body but not because he was losing his quirky personality. Izuku finished his work and jumped off of him, saying, "Do me a favor and hold on to this for me." Seeing the results of his actions, he looked on with cruel amusement. Rappa's body started to become pancake thin, with his limbs flapping in all directions and bending at different angles as though he was now composed of thin paper. "My body," he exclaimed as he fell to the ground, unable to stand or move normally. Izuku left the man there and approached the unconscious UA student and pro-hero, saying, "Looks like I found a use for origami after all. Are you all right, Fat Gum?" The hero took his young intern in his arms and said, "Yeah, we'll be fine." His gaze fell on the flattened Rappa on the ground, still trying in vain to move his body, and he asked, "What did you do to him?" Izuku merely said, "I gave him a quirk that basically makes a human an invalid." He opened a portal and hurried through it, saying, "I'd love to stay and chat, but I'm in a hurry. The police will be here momentarily." He defeated the villain I battled with such ease. Fat Gum wasn't upset about it, but he was impressed and a little afraid. Downside down. As he steadied himself, Aizawa gave the order, "Keep an eye out for him and let me know when he shows himself." The ceiling, floors, and walls kept moving and shifting like liquid. The outcome of Mimic's, Joy Iranaka's, peculiarity. In addition to trying to aid and identify the villain, Sir Night-Eye was also concerned for his pupil Mirio, who went on to locate and save the child. Another raid team member, Rock Lock, was also present. He used his peculiarity to lock down certain areas of the hallway to prevent Mimic from crushing them to death, but even he was unable to hold it for very long. Mimic's quirk affected everything in the corridor, and just as it was about to go out, a light blue aura enveloped everything. The three professional heroes whirled around, saying, "Oh dear." The blue space stone was glowing brightly, and there stood Midoriya, pressing the fingers of his all-powerful gauntlet against the fall. "You heroes look to be in over your heads on this one." When Aizawa saw the boy who had pulled the rug out from under the Hero Society, she yelled, "You!" Izuku approached them and said, "It's Director Midoriya. Please, let's keep things professional, erase your head." As Night-Eye spoke the boy's undeserved title, he questioned, putting a hint of venom in his voice. "Aren't you breaking a lot of laws by being here, Director?" It had surprised him too, this unexpected appearance. That being said, Midoriya was renowned for making sudden, unannounced appearances, so perhaps this shouldn't be too shocking. He took out his digital tablet and showed it to the heroes of Foresight, saying, "Under normal circumstances, yes." Now however, Night-Eye took it and quickly glanced over the documents on display, saying, "Things have changed. What's going on? Why am I unable to move?" Joy Iranaka's thoughts were racing as the stone hallways defied his commands. Rocklock glanced at the frozen floors and walls and said, "Wait a second. This is the same as my quirk. Consider it an enhanced rendition of yours," Izuku clarified. It would be best if he was unaware that the space stone was made using his DNA. It is best if people don't know who entered what. Night-Eye scowled and said, "Deus Ex Machina Protocol. The Prime Minister is letting you take over this case." Izuku answered, "Take over no. Assist yes. I've been following these quirk-destroying bullets for a while now. I traced it back to the Shihasaikai, and when I found out that you were also investigating them and were even planning a raid, I beseeched Minister Toriyama to lift the restraints placed upon me." He smiled happily. "Any questions?" he asked, tilting his head slyly and meeting All Might's former sidekick's gaze dead in the eye. Night-Eye scowled at the boy wearing a gauntlet who had defeated the man he looked up to the most, saying, "I can't believe the Prime Minister is letting him get away with this." Furthermore, Midoriya stole something that was Mirio Tagata's to have been given to All Might. Izuku Midoriya was highly respected by some, but Night-Eye saw through his Fa Section aide. Nothing more than a crafty thief who took what others had toilily acquired. Nevertheless, he allowed him to get away with far more than this. Deactivating the power of the Space Stone, Izuku activated the Reality Stone and amplified it with the Power Stone, saying, "Now this fellow that you've been having trouble with." It was easy to force the corridor into a more even and solid shape with these two stones. Mimic, his quirk overpowered, screamed in rage, "What is this?" Izuku's Infinity Gauntlet was too strong for him, even with trigger. Midoriya chuckled as he began tearing chunks out of the walls before crushing them with his telekinetic powers. "Oops, is your quirk boosting drug wearing off?" Your real body has to be here somewhere. That's it, Sir Night-Eye said, glancing at the green stone embedded in the boy's gauntlet. That stone, All Might says, is one for all. It was only a few feet away, right there. If he so desired, he could reach out and touch it. He might not get another opportunity like this, but he couldn't afford to take that chance. I could grab the stone and run, he said. Particularly since Midoriya possessed all those additional stones and could easily overcome him to take back the stone and his quirk as well. Night-Eye didn't want to consider the potential harm that a Midoriya possessing foresight could cause. Besides, there were more pressing issues at hand. Thank you for the help, but we have the situation under control, Aizawa told him. Izuku asked, not even looking at him, as he took out another section of the wall. Really? Because from where I'm standing it looks like you lot bit off more than you can chew with this one. I had to stop and help Sunyator as well as Fat Gum while on my way here. Both of which whom were in terrible condition. Still think you don't need my help? Sir Night-Eye found himself reluctantly nodding. He's right. Even though he claimed that the former sidekick was secretly planning to use his quirk on Midoriya the first chance that presented itself, he still said, we all know how powerful Director Midoriya is. With him here this will be over shortly. I've already established eye contact, he said, but his quirk required physical contact to become active. If only Night-Eye could see into the future, he might be able to discern his plans, as well as whether or not he was victorious and whether One for All was ever taken back. Izuku grinned and said, gotcha. As he observed the tall, scared man jump from a piece of debris that he had just torn off the wall. With the reality stone in hand, he extended his armored fist to grab Mimic's actual body and take his quirk. Or he would have, had Erasure not used his capture weapon to close range the Yakuza bad guy and then knock him out after deactivating his quirk. You're welcome, Aizawa retorted. Izuku gritted his teeth and said, thanks. He truly desired that oddity. Being able to combine with inanimate objects would have been quite helpful. Izuku also gave the officers and a few surviving robots orders to accompany him, saying, Rock Lock, I need you to go back and make sure Fat Gum and the others are safe. He gestured to Sir Night-Eye and Erasure Head and said, you two are with me. The infiltration units gave me Kai Chisaki's last location. Though none of the heroes enjoyed following his orders, they were powerless against Midoriya because his authority matched that of the Hero Commission. He claimed he wasn't here to take over, but in reality, he was. Night-Eye glared at him and said, then let's end this already. Izuku did not respond, but instead got ready to open a second portal. While that was originally going to be the conclusion, this is a much better cliffhanger. As he rammed his fist through Overhaul's open hand and into his face, Mirio thought, I just need to hold him off till Sir and the others get here. Fortunately, Mirio's quirk permeation was the ideal counter for the villain's quirk, which required him to touch someone or something with his hands. That didn't stop Overhaul, though, from destroying and changing their surroundings into something deadlier, like an exposed chamber filled with spiked pillars. Chisaki had attempted to kill the girl and make the hero give up because only he could heal her, but that proved to be easier said than done. He can't defend himself and Eri at the same time. Lemillion was always there to hit him or yank Eri out of danger, depending on what move he made. Chronostasis was unconscious and not involved at this time. Chisaki shouted, Nemoto, and threw one of the newly perfected bullets to the pinned underling. That was all he had left. Unlike the others that only temporarily disabled the quirk, this one would totally destroy it. Take the shot. Nemoto loaded a bullet into his handgun and pointed it in the direction of the young, blonde hero who had the audacity to take on the Shihasaikai. Lemillion would see the bullet pass through him, as they all had, but the child he was trying to save was not like that. He moved the sight to aim the gun at Eri, who was still wrapped in the hero's cape, and he pulled the trigger right away. He would have to suffer if he wished to keep her safe. Mirio saw where he was aiming, and he threw himself in front of the bullet without thinking. But he wasn't scared. The only way he could reassure Eri that everything would be okay was to maintain his smile the entire time. Oddly enough, there was no discomfort. The gunfire was heard by Mirio. Did the bullet miss its target entirely? He spun around and saw the tiny projectile suspended a few feet away from piercing him. Everyone stopped what they were doing and said, That was a close call. At last, they realized the portal had opened to the side of where they were fighting. Izuku stretched his gauntlet arm and stood at its edge. The bullet entered his open palm as it passed through the air, saying, "But it seems we've made it in time." As he passed through the portal, the green-haired teen looked at the small object in his hand and said, This is one of those quirk erasing bullets." Behind him came Sir Night-Eye and Erasure Head. "So how exactly were you planning to save anyone without your quirk Lemillion?" Izuku frowned as he turned to face Mirio, noting the other boy's impending stupid choice. He faced the Yakuza group's boss after slipping the bullet into his suit pocket. He grinned and said, "Hello Kai Chisaki. We meet again." Overhaul spit out the boy's villainous name with disgust, saying, "I don't go by that name anymore, Apotheosis." Pointing his gauntlet at him, Izuku's smirk grew even wider. "And I don't go by that name anymore."
So that's it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.